Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals public hearing, special hearing for March 7, 2019. On the calendar, we have calendar number 2018-166A, 40-31, 82nd Street, Queens.
Good morning.
My turn?
Yes. Your turn. State your name, please.
Wonderful. Paula Siegel. I'm a senior staff attorney in the Equitable Neighborhoods practice at the Community Development Project. We are counsel to Queens Neighborhoods United. As you see, lots of members of Queens Neighborhoods United are here today, and you'll be hearing from them about why this application is important, why they chose to file it, what the impacts on the neighborhood are. But I'd like to open by addressing some of the issues I heard come up at the review session and just focusing on the zoning resolution text. So very simply, we're here today to ask this board to give effect to the words of a zoning resolution, which were explicitly written to make a distinction between districts that can handle shopping malls and retail destinations and other neighborhoods, like the one where the property we're discussing today is located, that were meant to be protected from the impacts of having such destinations in them. This property is Zone C1. As we know, the C1, Commercial 1 zoning, is the most protective commercial zoning we have in the zoning resolution. The only thing that is more protective is not having commercial allowed at all. So C1 is local retail, and the only kind of retail that is allowed in a C1 district, as we know, is Use Group 6. Department stores are excluded from Use Group 6 and prohibited from all C1 districts. If the board investigates and determines that Target is properly a department store, as was suggested at the review session, then the permit must be annulled. But that question isn't really before us today. The permit states that this is a variety store, and we'll discuss the restrictions on variety stores in C1 districts for the remainder of the hearing. C1 districts allow some establishments with no size limit, but for variety stores, they explicitly cap the size per establishment. And behind me is the exact language from the zoning resolution. I'm just gonna, this is probably a familiar convention, but I'm using this, fancy typewriter font for things that I've pulled directly from the zoning resolution. The other font's mine. We're simply asking the board to give effect to these words, concluding that cellar space, that space underground where a retail destination can be physically placed with, our technology certainly allows it in 2019, concluding that space underground in cellars is exempt from the per establishment limit in the C1 district would absolutely nullify this limit that the drafters of the resolution carefully placed in the Use Group 6 district, Use Group 6 district definition. This inquiry really turns on the definition of floor area. As you see in the restriction, floor area appears in those funny little hash marks, which are really meant to be italic. And that's what we'll talk about. So the definition of floor area in the zoning resolution has two parts, and they're actually kind of lengthy. The first part is a list of all the things that must be summed in order to determine what floor area in those little hash marks really is. And the first part is clear. Cellar is floor area. It is space between, space on a floor in a building, unless it's been specifically excluded. Cellar space for determining the size of an establishment has not been specifically excluded by any language in the zoning resolution. Our inquiry can stop here, but the opponents today would like us and would like this board to port a definition that does not apply in this context and give them an exemption for cellar space when reading the limit on establishment size. The exemption they'd like you to borrow comes from the definition of floor area of a building, which is in the second part of the use group of, of the definition of floor area. And there are lots of exemptions from floor area of a building. But this is a very specific context in which lots of space is actually excluded when we are determining what the floor area of a building is, sometimes called the zoning floor area when you look at Department of Buildings documents. This number is important to figuring out whether your construction's bulk complies with the floor area ratio limit of the zoning district. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the per establishment limit. We're talking about the size of a specific store in the building. I heard a lot of concern about the holding in Raritan v. Silva, and I want to assure the board that the holding in Raritan v. Silva is limited to how to count cellar space when calculating the floor area of a building, the second part of the definition, the floor area ratio, or the FAR. The Court of Appeals, every single time it mentioned the calculation of floor area, was explicit to say that what it is referring to is the FAR, the floor area of a building, that the cellar space is excluded from FAR calculations. It described the purpose behind FAR calculations, and it clarified that for FAR calculations, cellars are excluded. Great. That's why we haven't raised an issue with the bulk of this building. Even though it has this 35-foot cellar, it's as tall as it is as tall above ground, more or less, as it is underground. It's like a mirror building. That's not the issue here. The issue is that the cellar has been purpose-built for a retail destination that cannot be allowed in a C1 district.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For you, though.
Great.
Isn't everything an establishment, like in Raritan, that was an establishment of a home, right? So it was a measurement of the cellar space for residential purposes. So each residential unit was being measured, right? So in that case, it was a single-family home, and so in that case, the cellar space was being included or excluded from the measurement of what goes on inside the home. So you could say the establishment that is the home. All floor area is related to an establishment because every use is effectively an establishment, right? You build an office building and you have either the entire office building is one office or it's many different offices, and you could look at it as the entire office building is an establishment, or each tenant occupies an establishment. Mixed-use buildings?
In a mixed-use building, right? The establishment of residential use in the building versus the hotel in the same building, that's the other establishment. But doesn't it all go to how big the building is that contains the establishment? Isn't it all about bulk, ultimately? No. Absolutely not. The answer to that last question is no, but I want to turn to the language of the Court of Appeals decision first and then maybe go back and answer some of those questions. But it is not all about bulk. And the zoning resolution very clearly regulates bulk and use and parking separately. Those are three separate inquiries. Nowhere in the Raritan decision is the word establishment used. It's not about establishment. It is about floor space used for dwelling purposes. And importantly, when we're calculating floor space used for dwelling purposes in Raritan or in any other calculation, there is no need to say how many dwellings, right? And are they going to be condos, which are technically their own block and lot, and you could say maybe they're their own thing, whatever that thing is, or is it going to be one rental building? It's just not a calculation that's done. When we're talking about dwelling space, it is an overall calculation that must be done for bulk. It's actually one of the frustrations that my clients have all the time when developers are proposing rezonings and asking for additional dwelling space, and then they won't tell them, well, how many apartments and how many bedrooms are they going to have? And it's just not, that is a totally different calculation. right? And nowhere in Raritan is there any mention of establishment. This is about the overall calculation of square footage that is going to be used for dwellings.
Well, actually, there is a density calculation for dwellings that's completely based on floor area as opposed to cellar space.
But it is not based on the number of distinct entities that operate or own those dwelling units.
No, but it is based on the number of dwelling units that are permitted in the floor area. You divide by a factor, and it tells you how many units you can have. So you could argue that each unit is an establishment. Again, establishment's a kind of a loose term in the zoning resolution. It flies around without a definition, right?
Well, I wouldn't say it flies around, but it does not have a definition. That's true. That's why we're here today. But I would not say that it flies around at all, and especially in the context of the retail restrictions, it is clearly about per establishment. If you forgive me a second,
maybe it might help.
I'm actually going to go to a different slide.
Okay, sure.
And I'm going to try to come back here. But
it might help if you say why you believe that. Do you, you get where I'm going? Okay.
Yeah, hang with me. But we're gonna just pretend you see nothing here. Wait, here, I can actually do this. Make me see nothing first.
No, that's okay.
No,
We can't read it fast enough. If
Okay,
you're turning
good.
that so
Well,
quickly.
here we go. Okay, so where the zoning resolution is concerned about the sum of uses in different establishments, it makes it very clear, right? And the board discussed at the review session the applicability of this Tribeca special district language, where the drafters were very clear to say retail cellar space allotted to different uses, which is the term that the zoning resolution uses, should be used as part of this calculation, because their point was, we want to say, for all these uses that we find should not have too much floor space in this area, it doesn't matter if it's CVS next door to Walgreens, you still got to add them up. And this was about buildings, right? In the Tribeca Special District Regulation, it's about buildings. In buildings fronting on Chambers Street, blah, 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 we need to make sure that we also count the retail establishments with these particular uses in the cellars, because if they didn't say that, this exemption to floor area of a building would give those building retail establishments in the Tribeca Special District the right to put anything they wanted at whatever size in the cellars, which nobody intended. But that's because in that section, we're not talking about floor area alone in its little hash marks. They are again talking about the floor area of a building. And we here are not. The use group 6 definition simply doesn't have those words in it.
But
Go ahead.
isn't an establishment a subset of a building that goes within the building?
Yes. Several establishments can be in a single building. So yes.
So, yes.
But it's not a subset. Several establishments can be in a single building, and the reason there are these limits is this is not an overall limit on retail. And the truth is, in a use group 6 district, one could have 2 different variety stores in the same building, as long as each one of them was less than 10,000, was less than 10,000 square feet of floor area. That would be fine. I mean, think about a mall, right? That's what we're talking about.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about here.
So you keep going back to floor area, right? Which
Because
is a
that's the-
defined term.
Yep.
Right? Which takes me to 1210, which basically says not included, any space in a cellar is not included in floor area unless it's a dwelling unit. So I'm not sure.
It's not included in floor area of a building, and we
I
are
think-
not
Of
talking
which
about
an
the floor area
establishment
of a
is
building.
subset. And so-
I do not think the zoning resolution,
Let her finish her sentence.
sorry, colloquially, that might be a helpful rubric, but that is not how the zoning resolution is constructed. Use is a defined term in the zoning resolution. Building is a defined term in the zoning resolution. An establishment is not. And we can't say that it is a subset of a building. There is nothing, it is something that can go in a building, just like I can walk into a building, right? But it's not something that's defined as being part of a building, and the limit itself is meant to limit the size of particular enterprises, particular going concerns, if we want to go back to 1961 and use some of their language.
I just want to then maybe take the term establishment out of this, and you just said enterprises.
Sure.
A building can consist of several enterprises.
Sure.
And it's not a, establishment is not a defined term, enterprise is not a defined term. I'll use your term enterprise. In a building, there could be several enterprises. And all these enterprises have to meet the uses that are permitted in these. If they fall under use group 6, these enterprises are allowed.
Yes.
Certain enterprises have some floor area limitations. And a variety store enterprise would have a floor area interpretation. So what is the difference? I mean, at the end of it, none of those are defined terms. What is defined is floor area. What is defined that in a building, you can have X number of enterprises as long as the total floor area of these enterprises meet all the regulations and the definition of floor area and the use groups.
But this doesn't say total, it says per establishment.
Exactly.
So
In this
Unlike the Tribeca language, which is the total.
Let's take Tribeca.
This says
out of
per
it, because
establishment.
Tribeca is a special district. Tribeca is unique. That was a special district where regulations have been created specifically for that area. That's not the general application of the floor area. Floor area is applied to a building. You can have many establishments. Forget about the fact that there is a 10,000 square foot. You could have any of these stores that do not have any floor area limitations, right? In use groups, there are a lot of drugstore does not have a floor area limitation. So
But Target is not a drugstore.
I'm talking about any use group in use group 6 that does not have a floor area limitation can have a floor area of 20,000, 30,000 square feet. Per your definition, that we should then count everything that's in the cellar towards floor area.
Absolutely. But there's no limit, so there's no reason you couldn't have a 30,000 square foot drugstore.
But per this definition, any floor area that's in the cellar, you're applying it, the floor area definition clearly says that any use that is not a dwelling unit is not counted as floor area in the cellar.
When you are calculating the floor area of a building, not the floor area per enterprise or per establishment.
Let me distill this for a second. It seems to me that your argument is that these terms are defined for different purposes. And the purpose of use group 6 is defined to limit, because use group 6 is the most protective of the commercial uses. It's defined to limit the size of the size of an establishment, so it remains in conformity with the other establishments around it. And the idea of a floor area of a building is more with relation to bulk sizes. Is that distilled?
That's absolutely right, and that is what the Court of Appeals said.
Well,
Well,
no, they said
well,
it
let's
Okay.
before we get there, I just
Okay.
we have, so this is the crux of your argument. And in making that argument, you're stating that we shouldn't look towards the definition of floor area as we see it in the zoning resolution, because that is only with relation to the floor area of a building.
That's not exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying we should look to the first part of the definition,
Okay.
which explicitly says it is all of the floors unless they are specifically excluded.
But if I can
Okay.
just stay on that for 1 second, the very next line, and I know we're talking about the floor area of a building, but can you acknowledge that this specific establishment is in fact in a building?
It is in a building, but yes, it's in a building. It is an
right?
establishment
So let's
in a building.
pull back, right? So
Yeah.
pull back, let's not just target this entire building, right?
No, Target is one of several establishments
understand,
that will
right.
be in this
So
building.
here's Target, the establishment. We're pulling back, we're zooming out, here's the building.
Yep.
I'm designing this building.
Great.
I'm trying to determine how much floor area I have.
Great.
I'm reading this, I'm trying to calculate my floor area, and I go to the next, and I'm designing the building. the floor area of a building shall not include, very first, cellar space, except when such space is used for dwelling purposes.
I think what her
Then where do I, what do I, what do
I
I?
think-
Dwellings in this.
I think her definition, in her definition, it would be, if I may, it would be assumed that there could be 20 establishments in the cellar, but all of them have to be 10,000 square feet.
Absolutely.
That's, and if it was
Square
10
feet of what? Of floor area?
of
a
what-
floor space?
Of floor space. of-
Well, and floor space is not floor area.
Exactly.
And so
That's what I'm
therefore,
No, it would
I
have
don't
to, I'm
follow
sorry,
the
it would
argument.
have to be 10, I was nodding along until that very last
Yeah.
moment.
So-
right?
Floor area,
It's
I
the-
guess.
Yeah.
It is 10,000 square feet of floor area using this exact definition. Floor area is the
But that's
sum.
But
not
there
the
is no
complete
floor
definition.
area in a cellar unless it's being used for dwelling purposes. So I don't understand how you jump then when talking about an establishment. The first thing we look at is the building. There's no floor area in the cellar of the building unless it's
Not
used for
used for dwelling
dwelling
purposes.
But the
purposes.
zoning resolution doesn't say that.
It doesn't say it on your screen.
But
it's
if you
the very
go
next
down
line
to
of the zoning
exceptions,
Which, I'm sorry, which,
1,200.
1210.
Yep.
Right under O. I have it on my screen. If
oh,
you
sorry,
see
I can
it.
bring that text
Yeah,
up if
just,
you want to see
so
it, and I will, and we can contextualize what this is, so this is the line that comes right after.
No, it's not actually. So I'm looking at
Oh, sorry.
1210.
No, you're right. I
Floor
skipped a
area.
sentence because yeah. No, you're right. That's the part that was added after Raritan because the Department of City Planning wanted to be sure.
Right, and is that the
That-
text we have now?
But that is for FAR and it is for dwelling.
It's not for
purposes.
FAR. FAR is floor area ratio, which is a separate definition. We're talking
Sure.
about floor area of a building.
We are talking about floor area of a building, exactly. And we are not, so no one's gonna live in Target, right? So the idea of excluding the cellar because dwelling purposes are included, that's a mismatch, right?
No.
There's no dwelling issue.
If I may, I'll just
ahead.
read.
Yeah.
Just read the definition as
Yeah.
you're describing it. So, in particular, floor area includes. Then we go down to O, which says any other floor space not specifically excluded. Below that, however, the floor area of a building shall not include cellar space, except where such space is used for dwelling purposes. So I ask, is that line
This is-
not a specific exclusion?
Right, exactly. No, this is here. It is a specific exclusion.
Okay.
Right.
So
For dwelling
how does that match with your argument?
Because this is about, it is a specific exclusion. I had to think about where this began. It's a specific exclusion, but it's a specific exclusion from floor area of a building.
But you just conceded that taking the specific establishment as target, as we have in this case, you conceded that the establishment is in a building.
But
I'm the
we're not
architect.
talking about the size of the building. The building is much larger than
we
the
are.
23,000
I
square
think
feet.
Right, but
that Target is going to
if
take
you've
up.
already taken out all of the floor area from the building that's in the cellar, right?
Haven't.
No, let's
Absolutely
just take-
not. The zoning resolution does not say we should. Because the zoning resolution, and let's just go word by word, it says that floor area, and its little hash marks, is the sum of the gross areas of the several floors, of which the cellar is one, of a building or buildings measured from the exterior faces of exterior walls or from the center lines of walls separating two buildings. In particular, there's a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't apply to us, and then it says, any other floor space not specifically excluded. The cellar is gross area of a floor of the building.
But the very next
not
sentence
floor
tells
area.
us not to include it.
Yes.
And
When
that's key.
we are calculating the floor area of a building, not floor area alone. Had the definition said this, if this is what use group 6 said, then you would be absolutely correct.
Then
But
why
it
would
does
you,
not.
why is there this special purpose district in Tribeca? Why did they have to write that text in order to include the cellar space in the total
Perfect.
establlement for
Perfect. That is-
variety stores or whatever it is?
It's already.
Okay, so.
If it was so
because-
clear, why would they write this?
So let's just go, I'm sorry that I'm making you watch this sort of maybe slightly seizure-inducing show. So the exclusion is to floor area of a building, right? We see that. In the Tribeca Special District, in order to achieve their goals of limiting certain uses on certain streets, they couldn't get away from using the defined term building, right? In buildings fronting these streets, they wanted to limit these uses. As soon as this term building pops up, then yes, the exclusion applies, right? The definition gives us an exclusion for the cellar space for when you are calculating the floor area, which is here, right, of a building. And since that wasn't their intention was to have the cellars included, they had to specify that space in the cellar counts. But in the use group 6 definition, those words just aren't there. We can't add them. That's up to the Department of City Planning. If they want to add them, if they want to say in C1 districts, the most protective retail districts we have in the city, we want to allow massive underground retail destinations like Target, variety stores. They can add these words, and then the exclusion will apply. But as it's written now, they're not there.
So if the defining term in Tribeca was establishment, they wouldn't have to add these cellar issues?
You got it.
Okay.
So, but in Raritan, there was a long discussion about the purpose of floor area, which is why the court was essentially, I think they were quite angry with the Board of Standards and Appeals for having ignored what was the clear text of the zoning resolution, right? And the court went on about what is the purpose of floor area. Floor area is to limit the bulk of a building. It's what happens above ground. That's what the court discussed, right? That the purpose of bulk regulations is what we see, right? As opposed to use regulations. And by the way, you could have had something in the use regulations that is limiting it as to the floor area of a building, that includes the cellar space, but city planning selected not to do that. Whenever we talk about floor area, it is always related to the bulk of the building. Otherwise, the architect, as our Ms. Monroe said, otherwise the architect would not know how to build a building, right?
I'm sorry, I disagree.
Floor
area is used in bulk regulations and in use regulations, and today we're talking about a use regulation. In Raritan, they discussed a bulk regulation.
So we are in fact talking about a bulk regulation when we talk about floor area, because the architect is hired to design a building. The architect doesn't know what's going in the building, right? The client says, I want to do a retail building, I want a 2-story retail building, and I'm looking for tenants. Architect starts the design, does the project, follows the instructions about what's floor area. There's a maximum floor area ratio that limits the size, the bulk of the building, and does the drawings. The building is built to receive retail. So as long as the retail complies with the definitions for those uses, that retail can move in. How could you unpack that into 2 separate analyses when it's the same word floor area being used both in the use lists and in the bulk lists?
Because in the use list, you simply are not calculating the floor area of the building.
I think what
you are calculating the floor area per establishment.
I think what council is attempting to get at is they could build the same building, only instead of one store occupying all of that cellar space, it'd have to be divided in so much that each store has 10,000 square feet.
Absolutely.
But this is not.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
So I think what council, I think I was just. So what council is saying, I could say that. What council is saying is that the architect could still build the same building, but this is a use regulation. So each retail that comes into this cellar can only be limited to 10,000 square feet. That is the argument that is being placed before us.
Okay, the problem with that is the use of the word floor area, which is a defined term. If If the drafters had wanted that to be, they would use something else, like square footage.
And I think that's a really good point that I'm hoping is going to be addressed.
Okay.
And just to take it one step further, if the drafters really wanted to limit each establishment to be less than 10,000, they would have made sure all use group 6 would be less than 10,000. They did not. So, it was only very specific uses that they wanted to limit to 10,000. And city planning's letter kind of gives a reason why in certain instances, some of the uses within use group 6 had a limitation of floor area, because some of them had uses that from an urban design point of view may not have been a desirable use to be fronting on a neighborhood retail storefront, which was better to be hidden in the belly of the building.
And from what I gather from the papers and what I'm hearing here, and although I do hope that at some point we will get into why we should believe that the text was written this way, because without that, it is a leap without that. But what I believe is that there's a public policy for these areas that are protected, that they should be limited to this size for the neighborhood context, from what I'm gathering.
Can we let the appellant state their case?
Yeah,
Because it's almost like you should be on that side.
I'm just trying to.
Case first, which I think is problematic when this goes to the next step after the BSA.
This
So I
isn't my
think we should-
position.
Right, but I think we should let the appellant make the case. We can ask questions, we can voice whether or not we agree or disagree, but I think it kind of muddies the record if one of the commissioners is restating the argument as if it's our own argument.
Oh, well,
That's what
I'll
I'm
state for the
thinking.
record, this
Okay,
isn't my argument.
Let's move on. Ms. Siegel, do you want to continue your?
Okay, I'm trying to figure out where to pick up exactly. The drafters of the zoning resolution used the term floor area on purpose because they wanted the Department of Buildings and this board to rely on the definition of floor area, which requires the summing of all of the floors of the building, right? When calculating what the actual size per establishment is. They did not use the term floor area of a building. Though in the Tribeca case, they did have to refer to buildings because that's what they were talking about, right? And then they had to add extra words to make sure that the exclusion that applies to floor area of a building did not swallow their intent. That wasn't necessary here. There's nothing in the use group 6 regulation that refers to buildings. They're simply not there. And as Commissioner Chanda pointed out, there are very specific uses in use group 6 that are size limited. The drafters of the zoning resolution did not want to size limit all retail. Only particular kinds of retail that has a tendency to draw congestion, to draw people from outside the neighborhood, and to bring the kind of things into the neighborhood that a local retail residential district is supposed to be protected from. Today, we're talking about an establishment that is properly classed as one of those uses that is size limited. So if they want to put it in the cellar, that's fine, but it has to be 10,000 square feet or less.
Can I ask a question, actually? It just sparked something in my my memory of in the city planning letter, as well as I think DOB's submission, discusses how cellar floor space is included for the calculation of accessory parking. And one of the ills that you were just talking about was destination retail brings a lot of people out from outside the neighborhood. It's not local retail, and that can cause congestion and problems with traffic. But if that ill is addressed by including the amount of cellar space in the calculation for off-street parking regulations, then what exactly is the ill that is related to having cellar space not be counted towards floor area for an establishment?
Councilor, respectfully, I'm going to let the people who live in the neighborhood describe that for you, but I want to be very
specific. It's an interpretation question because it talks about how the zoning resolution, in one instance, for the purposes of calculating off-street parking, that has to be provided on the zoning lot, right? Says cellar space is floor space, floor area
does not say,
specifically. Whereas for the calculation of the floor area of a building, I'll keep that, I'll keep that terminology. It's not counted as floor area. So if it's recognizing that these spaces can bring more cars and is having that space calculated, the number of cars that have to be, accommodated on the site, then what's the problem? What's the issue?
Cars are not the extent of the congestion and issues that local retail districts are supposed to protect residents from. Cars are part of the issue, and I just want to remind you that in the section of the zoning resolution, as I'm sure you're familiar, the calculation for parking and accessory bicycle parking, they're all based on floor area in hashtags.
Yeah.
So, right, not floor area of a building. So in the definition here, it's just a restatement of how those sections work. Right? So there's
I'm not following. I'm sorry.
And I just want, before you go on, I just wanted to clarify, when the parking regulations are invoked with respect to the parking calculations and whether or not cellar space is included, it doesn't state that the cellar space becomes floor area. It simply states that for the purposes of calculating parking, you measure cellar space. So at no point does the zoning resolution convert cellar space to floor area where we might be concerned that there's an occasional definitional melange.
No
Instead,
conversion
right?
is necessary. Cellar space is floor area. And in the parking section, I apologize that I don't have the text for you here, but in the charts in the parking section, it simply states floor area. So this definition of floor area is the one that applies in the parking chapter of the zoning resolution.
Sure. How do you decide that cellar space is floor area?
Because it is part of the gross area of the building, and it is not specifically excluded.
Okay, I think now we're repeating, I didn't understand how you make that leap. When we're looking at parking regulations, it just says, for the purposes of calculating parking for the following uses, a limited group of uses, cellar space shall be included in the calculations. That does not mean that cellar space is at any point turned into floor area.
It doesn't need to be turned into floor area because it is floor area by definition.
By which definition?
By this definition, 1210.
Okay, I think we've already done this circle, so
Yeah.
why don't you go on with
continue.
the rest of your argument? Yeah.
Okay. I just want to address one other thing that I heard at the review session was a concern about this 2017 Soho special permit and its relevance to this case. I just want to point out that it is extremely relevant to the case at hand. It's in the papers, and I apologize, I don't have that many slides on this, but I'll just talk through it. So what we're dealing with here is a C1 district. This special permit that we referred to in our filing is a special M15 district, which essentially was a loft conversion. And it's extremely restricted, just like a C1 district is, and also limits retail to use group 6, where if you want to have a variety store or a number of other things that are size limited, or I'm sorry, if you want to have a variety store or a number of other things that are described in use group 6, you're limited to 10,000 square feet.
What agency issues that special permit?
The City Planning Commission.
And which agency was the source of the final determination that you're actually appealing?
The Department of Buildings, and I'll explain, if you give me a moment, I'll explain
sure.
why this is relevant, right? So, in that matter, the applicant's got this beautiful historic building, it's landmarked, it's a corner, it's 462 Broadway. If you're not familiar with it, it's been a kind of big to-do renovation. And their idea was that it was going to be a great place for them to rent to folks who want flagship locations on Broadway, but they were limited by the use group 6 restrictions. And so they went and sought a special permit that would allow them to rent the space in the cellar of that building to retail establishments that are larger than 10,000 square feet. It's not the only thing they sought in the permit, but they went all the way to the City Planning Commission to get permission to do precisely what the owners of the property that we're discussing today are doing without any permission from the commission.
So just to
And this is
clarify
their
that
marketing
special permit. So the special permit in the Soho district, which is an M15A or B, retail below the level of the second story is just simply not permitted.
Right.
So you must go for a waiver from city planning. That's what they pursued.
They
right?
pursued 3 different waivers,
They did,
actually.
but the issue of the cellar, which was included, so below the ceiling of the first floor, below the second story, right, includes the cellar, because that's where you cap it, right? So as long as the cellar space was not, well, cellar space is not included in floor area, but it's not allowed to be retail. So you must get a special permit to even have 1 square foot of cellar space being occupied by retail. Don't confuse that with the second special permit, which was required to exceed 10,000 square feet of floor area, which is above the first floor. So the proposal was for floor area in excess of 10,000 square feet on the first floor.
And in the cellar.
And
then
for
these
floor
are their marketing
space in the
materials.
cellar. Cellar space, what in the zoning resolution is described as hashtag cellar space. Because cellar is a defined term.
Cellar is a defined term, absolutely. But, so they wanted to, they sought a whole bunch of permits, you're absolutely right, but one of them
don't
gave them
mix
the
them.
right to market their cellar as spaces for retail that are larger than 10,000 square feet. These are their marketing materials. So they're saying their cellar could be used by a single establishment at 16,000 square feet, or by 2 establishments, one at 12,000 and one at 4,000.
That's not why they,
If you read their applications, it was one of the things that they asked for.
okay.
And I'm happy to take questions, but I think
I
that
have
that's...
a question.
Yeah.
So is your position that an establishment is part of a building? Or
An
the
establishment
building
is located in a building.
Is located in a building?
Yes, but those are, it is not part of a building. It
it's
is
not
just simply
part of a
located
building.
in a building.
Okay, and your position, it's located in a building, and the building is designed for the establishments, is that?
In our case, the building has been designed for this establishment. There is no reason to have a 35-foot deep cellar, 35-foot deep cellar with a single open space unless you've signed a lease with Target already. There's no reason for the developer to be building this purpose-built building for one large retailer. They're doing it in reliance on a lease that's already been recorded, or a memorandum is inacrous. So, not always, but in our case it is, and that's why we're here.
Your position is also that there's no upper limit on the floor area of variety stores, so you could have 20 establishments, like we talked about earlier, right? Okay, so.
Yep.
If you could just respond to the statement and the resolution under 1201 that a building or structure includes any part thereof, and that the phrase used for includes arranged for, designed for, intended for, maintained for, or occupied for, in writing, that would be helpful.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Section 1201, E and F. And so why, if you could just expand on your position.
Yeah, sure.
as
So
to
12.
the meaning of building and the meaning of use.
Absolutely.
And how that relates to establishment.
Be happy to.
And then also, if I could just, either now or in writing, if you could respond to my question about what, and this is purely from a textual perspective, what it is that the floor area definition, as DOB argues, in that the cellar is not included for floor area, how that, but it is included, sorry, for the calculation of off-street parking, how that creates ills that are not addressed otherwise. You talked about congestion, but I didn't hear any other ills.
So the ills are described in the zoning resolution as the things that we're supposed to protect local retail districts from. Primarily, that's congestion, but that's not cars. Nowhere in the zoning resolution is it is congestion limited to cars?
And so
congestion is also people, it's delivery vehicles, it's...
I'd also say the floor space in the cellar also is calculated for the for loading berths.
Loading docks.
Yes,
Loading bikes.
for the loading berths, but not for the trucks coming down the street and blocking ambulances, and not for the people getting on the 7 train and coming into a residential neighborhood where people are commuting mostly to work in Manhattan, and making it much more difficult for people who live in this neighborhood and rely on the small stores in that neighborhood to actually live their lives, because they have a destination retail location that has been put into a neighborhood that was meant to be protected from exactly that.
But so ultimately, what we're talking about is traffic. Is that what your issue is?
If your definition of traffic is car traffic, then no, but ultimately what we're talking about is a disruption to a residential neighborhood by people coming from outside of that neighborhood. So if that's traffic, then yeah, that's
And if
traffic.
can you find a
but
basis
just
towards this
before you-
intention?
wait,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just
Yeah,
before you
absolutely.
go there, the issue of traffic, right? How does the city planning department regulate traffic? It doesn't, actually. What it regulates is parking, right? There isn't any method, because city planning actually isn't in charge of the street systems, to regulate traffic, right? The Department of Transportation does that, right?
The zoning resolution
let me
states
just
that
finish,
legislative intent.
So the way that the city planners deal with it is they make sure that, to the extent that a use is a traffic generator, they require parking on site. And they calculate how much parking needs to be on site. There's basic studies that determine utilization rates and demand. And based on those kinds of standard demands, they determine that we need this many parking spaces in the location to compensate for that kind of demand, right? To address it, so that it pulls the traffic off the street. It pulls the cars off the on-street parking spaces and pulls them inside the building. So if city planning, when it chooses on various establishments to measure the cellar space for the purposes of parking, isn't it addressing then concern about congestion? And in terms of pedestrian space, again, that's not really city planning's pursuit, right? Again, that's DOT that makes the sizes of the sidewalks. Right, so it's kind of the wrong department to be talking about.
I don't think so. I want to draw your attention to the entirety of Article 3, Chapter 1, the Commercial District Regulations Statement of Legislative Intent, where in the zoning resolution, which it is Department of Building's job to enforce, it stated very clearly that local retail districts are required to provide convenient locations near all residential areas, and it is only in the general commercial districts that, let's see. General commercial districts. These districts comprise the city's major and secondary shopping centers, which provide for occasional family shopping needs and for essential services to business establishments over a wide area, and which have a substantial number of large stores generating considerable traffic. That's the language of the resolution.
For which
this is C4, right? So this is where use group 10 is allowed, if I may. The district regulations are designed to promote convenience shopping and the stability of retail development by encouraging continuous retail frontage and by prohibiting service and manufacturing establishments which tend to break up continuity. That's C4. Now I want to read C1 to you, because the contrast is very real. C1, local retail districts. These districts are designed to provide for local shopping and include a wide range of retail stores and personal service establishments which cater to frequently recurring needs. Since these establishments are required in convenient locations near all residential areas, and since they're relatively unobjectionable to nearby residences, these districts are widely mapped. The district regulations are designed to promote convenient shopping and the stability of retail development by encouraging continuous retail frontage and by prohibiting local service and manufacturing establishments. But the point is that they're meant to be unobjectionable to nearby residences and serve the local residents. And the prospective lessees here and their prospective landlords have repeatedly at public hearings said that what they are building is a retail destination. And they have touted the convenience of the train and the ability of people from other neighborhoods, not the one that this building is located in, to get to this location easily as one of the highlights of their project. And that is simply not what the zoning resolution contemplates. This district is meant to be protected. There are other districts where such an establishment belongs. And certainly, the applicants are free to seek a permit, they're free to seek a rezoning, as they've attempted and failed to do. They're free to try to make a change, but we're here to protect the existing zoning and to actually give the zoning resolution language and definitions real life.
So I have one more question, and then I don't know, are you finished with your presentation?
I am finished with my presentation, but I'd like to turn it over to the public.
The Raritan case is let's say, a very clear case for us with very clear direction from the courts, and the courts have cited to Raritan many times where the board seeks to avoid the clear meaning of the text, right?
Certainly.
So, certainly in Raritan, the court determined that the board was ignoring the clear meaning of the text. So you're asking us really, because as you've heard, we're having a lot of trouble ignoring a definition that exists in thousands of places throughout the zoning resolution in consistent form, and to jump to a public policy consideration that's described in the paragraph that you read for C1 districts, right? So what I would want you to brief much more extensively than you did in your papers is at what point, based on case law, does the BSA have the authority to look beyond a clear meaning definition? And from what you're hearing from the board, we believe it's a clear meaning definition, to look beyond that and look to legislative intent, which is not so clear, frankly, because that little paragraph that you read in the C1 was written in December of 1961, where, as I mentioned yesterday, it drew from 1958 studies where shopping malls were just kind of the rage. They were all being invented at the moment. One of the largest shopping malls in America had just been occupied with a 400,000 square foot Macy's, right? So when we talk about department stores, they were concerned that a department store would locate in one of these local retail districts, but that a variety store, such as a Woolworth's, would be the local services. Now, what is a Woolworth when we think about it? They sell everything, and Target sells everything. So hence, the variety store makes sense that it fits within the C1 concept. It's just that we're a bigger consumer society than we were before in the 1960s. So that's the other thing, is the zoning resolution doesn't change that often to adapt the uses to our contemporary uses. We still have, each of us has like a favorite non-existent use that still exists in the zoning resolution.
I just want to respond to that directly, which is that if this board finds that Target is properly a department store, then it is simply not allowed. And since we agree it's a variety store,
that's not the question before us. That's
Yeah.
not the question before us. The question before us is cellar space, floor area.
Sure, but just to respond to you directly on Woolworths as a variety store.
Yes.
Even in 1961, if somebody wanted to put a Woolworths at this location in Queens, that Woolworths would have to be limited to 10,000 square feet.
Of floor area.
Exactly.
Right? Yes, 10,000 square feet of floor area, and Raritan is distinguishable. Raritan concerns the bulk. And so I'm happy to brief that.
Okay, so it's more than just distinguishing Raritan, which is something that we mentioned that you really do need to do. It's to support your argument that we can look behind the clear meaning in the text, beyond the clear meaning in the text, to legislative intent. Because Raritan told us that we can't, right?
I'm happy to do that, but I want to just reiterate that the text is clear.
Okay. I'm sorry, the what?
The text is clear.
I don't think you can say, there's,
Clear to her argument. It clearly favors her argument.
Is what you're saying. Okay.
there-
Okay. All right, DOB, thank you very much. Department of Building.
Let's see, maybe I'll leave that up.
You can leave that up in case.
Yeah, because you might want it later.
Yeah, let's see if maybe we can, no, what is this?
And maybe just shut the projector.
You don't want the words?
You can just,
you sign? You can just turn it off.
no, that's,
It still works.
Can you move that, you know what, just move the behind the,
podium.
Behind the
And then
podium.
the podium would stop.
just behind, move it behind the podium.
Oh, yeah.
Just do that, yeah.
Thank you.
Tim McKernan for the Department of Buildings. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Based on the Commissioners' comments at the executive session and today, I believe that the Board understands the Department's analysis, so I'll only summarize it quickly. As stated in the Department's papers, the Department requests that the Board affirm the issuance of a new building permit for the two-story building at 4025 82nd Street, Queens, which includes a Use Group 6 variety store, primarily located in the cellar and with approximately 24,000 square feet of building code gross area. The basis of the Department's approval is that while Zoning Resolution Section 3215 limits the amount of zoning floor area of a Use Group 6 variety store to 10,000 square feet, the definition of floor area in Zoning Resolution Section 1210 explicitly excludes cellar space. Therefore, the new building in the C1 district is as of right pursuant to the zoning resolution, and the Department of Buildings had and has no authority to deny the permit. I do want to add one point about the definition of floor area, which is all floor area is of a building. If you go to the start of the definition, floor area, which is in quotes there because by the conventions of the zoning resolution, the first reference to a defined term is in quotes. It goes on, floor area is the sum of gross areas of the several floors of a building or buildings. So I think that addresses the challenger's argument. And I just want to add one other thing about Raritan. The reason Raritan talks about FAR is because FAR was the regulation at issue there. But the definition of floor area, which is the same one at issue here, was the same. To get to FAR, you have to have floor area. So I don't think there's
So I just
any
want to go
basis.
back to that first sentence that you said.
Sure.
So you're saying that the definition of floor area includes everything, right? That's what you just said in the first, let me just finish that. You said it includes everything, and then you keep reading the definitions that says, except when it's excluded, right? Isn't that what, you just read that one paragraph that says, the definition of that floor area in quotes, it includes the gross floor area of the building from the outside walls, right? That's what it says.
Yep.
So we start off including, being completely inclusive, and then we neck it down because we exclude mechanical space, we exclude.
Accessory parking space.
Yeah, accessory parking, there's a list of things we exclude.
Elevator, all of
Yeah, right, because otherwise, for whatever reason, there's
So
public
basically,
policy.
what you're saying, floor area is kind of giving the outer limits and then, but what actually, to give you the walls where the walls can be, but then within the walls, there are certain spaces that are excluded from the floor area, defined floor area term, which also goes towards FAR.
Agreed. The point I was trying to make was the challenger spent a lot of time talking about the phrase of a building in the exclusions, but I just wanted to point out that exact same phrase is in the opening of the definition. So anytime the definition floor area applies, that phrase of a building comes with it.
It's
Okay,
actually
this is
is.
about of a building.
Yes.
It
Okay.
actually says is. Floor area is, not of, right?
Floor area is the sum of the
The
gross
sum.
area of the several floors of a building or building.
So it's always of a building.
That's my point.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to answer any other questions that the board has, but it seems clear to me that the board understands the department's basis.
I guess just for the sort of the flip side of the argument, again, my question always using Raritan is that seminal case that tells the Board of Standards and Appeals, read what the text says, and if it's clear, that's the answer. If you could brief that subject, when the courts have allowed the board to look beyond the clear definition to the legislative intent. So, or when in general the courts have allowed the board to look at the legislative intent.
No problem.
Okay.
I'd also ask if you could brief whether floor area there's ever been a separate definition of floor area as to use as opposed to bulk.
Separate.
What do you mean?
I believe if Commissioner Otley-Brown will permit me to state what I believe the appellant is suggesting.
So permitted.
Thank you. I believe the appellant is suggesting that floor area in the contents of use per establishment is defined one way, and when referring to bulk is defined a separate way. I don't know. I haven't seen any evidence or anything that supports this position. It's just one of the questions I'd like to have briefed.
Okay, so that's kind of it could be difficult because it's sort of like
if it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist.
But I guess the issue is, has the Department of Buildings that it knows of encountered situations where it measured floor area differently with respect to use, I suppose, right? So
right.
that would be a situation like that. Again, it's kind of proving a negative, and where do you look for that needle, you know? But maybe, yeah. I'm not sure how you do that.
If the answer is there isn't any,
right,
that'd be important to state.
right, okay. Okay.
Could you also brief the role of preamble statements in the zoning resolution in terms of whether it would be proper to deny the issuance of a building permit based on those preambles?
Sure, I can discuss that now, or if you'd prefer to have it written in the brief.
Well, if you have some answer, you can always follow it up. We're interested.
So I think the Court of Appeals, which is New York's highest court, has opined on exactly that issue and held that such statements, such prefatory statements, are not conditions precedent. In Applebaum v. Deutsch, the Court of Appeals upheld the determination of DOB and BSA that the Organization of African Unity's mission to the UN, with a library, office space, and living quarters for personnel, was a Use Group 3 community facility pursuant to ZR 2213, and therefore as of right in the R8 district. The majority in the First Department case upheld that determination of DOB and BSA. But actually the dissent argued in that First Department case that because the mission did not match all the descriptions in that prefatory statement at the beginning of, in that case, 2213, but 2213 was exactly parallel to 3215 here. So the dissent homed in on the phrase essential services for the residents. And the dissent argued that because this diplomatic mission did not provide essential services, therefore it could not be a community facility, even if it was a not-for-profit. However, the Court of Appeals then expressly rejected the proposition that introductory statements in 2213 are conditions precedent. So I think the Court of Appeals has weighed in on exactly this issue and rejected that argument.
Okay, and I think that actually was already in your brief, yes.
I think it was actually in Target's, Target's submission.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions for
I have a
Toby?
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I mentioned this yesterday in the executive session. If you look at section 3200, it says general provisions, and it starts, the paragraph starts with this: in order to carry out the purpose and provisions of this zoning resolution, the uses of buildings or other structures and the open uses of zoning lots or portions thereof have been classified and combined into use groups. This is like an introduction to the different use groups definitions. And then it proceeds, it's a brief statement is inserted at the start of each use group, including 3215, of course, to describe and clarify, yes, the basic characteristics of the use group. So the introductory statement at the beginning of each use group is meant to describe and clarify this use group. Now, let's put this aside and move to 3215, which is one of the sections that's meant by the previous statement I just mentioned. If you look at 3215 use group 4, it says, use group 6 consists primarily of retail stores and personal service establishments, which, number 1, provide for a wide variety of local consumer needs, and number 2, have small service area and are therefore distributed widely throughout the city. So for me, I look at this like the main characteristics and description of use group 4.
Use group 6.
Use group 6, you mean?
6.
Use group 6, yes, thank you. It has small service area and it's distributed widely. I totally understand that the service area is not a defined term in the zoning resolution.
So I think I'm sorry I wasn't clear. That was the case that I was just citing. The Court of Appeals has ruled on exactly this issue with not this section of the zoning resolution, but in terms of use group 3, which is 2213. And the Court of Appeals found that those statements are not conditions precedent. So even if one of those statements does not exactly match the use that's listed explicitly in that use group, if the proposed use matches the listed use, then it is as of right in the appropriate zoning district.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the description here. Describe this use group 6 as it has a small service area.
Yeah, but that's
Right?
what I, yeah.
Yes. Now, let's think about 2 stores here. One of them has 10,001 square foot of service area, total area, on the first floor. And the subject store, which is, I believe, 23,000 square feet in the cellar. If I go to the DOB and apply for the first one, the DOB would say, based on the definition of the floor area, no, you're exceeding the 10,000 limit on the first floor. This is a floor area, you can't do it. But if I take the second one and I go to the DOB, they would permit that. But when you compare these two, the 23 square feet service area is much larger.
20,000 square feet.
The 23,000 square feet is much larger than the 10,001 square feet. Isn't this like a contradiction?
But you're saying the 10,000 is in the cellar?
No,
No, the 10,001
One is on the first floor.
is on the first floor, so it can be built.
Right, and
But
the
the 23,000 is in the cellar, and it could be permitted. Looking at the 10,001 and the 23,000 as service areas, the entire area of the store, gives me the impression that this is a contradiction.
But I just want to, I think that one thing, I don't know if you're actually meaning to use the word service area. I think you mean floor area?
No, service area.
Service,
It states
No, it's a
service area.
service
but
area. It's service-
It's not defined.
Yeah, service area is not defined. It to me reads as if it's talking about the area of a neighborhood.
Right.
And
Yes,
it's talking
that's what I'm
about
getting to.
distributed widely, like a Dwayne Reed, a CVS, like it's
Yes,
ubiquitous.
service.
Service.
It's
as in
serving a
serves
neighborhood, it's serving a neighborhood, and because it is serving a neighborhood, that's why there are widely distributed
Yes.
throughout the city.
Because every neighborhood
Because
needs
every
one.
neighborhood needs a drugstore. Whereas if you go to use group 7, the term is also used, but in that it says, has relatively small service area and therefore widely distributed. So it has little less, it's not totally local, it is a little bit bigger than a local network, so it is also widely distributed. But then if you go to use group 10 or 8, it becomes, 8 says, depends on a wide service radius and may be appropriately located in secondary and major commercial. That means it is drawing crowd from a larger area, so therefore, it has a wider service radius.
So you're saying this, your understanding to the service area here, it's the area that is served
Yes.
by the store.
Geographic area,
But
not the zoning area. It's a geographic area, not the zoning floor area, not the building area.
But if you look at this, if you adapt that and you look at use group 10, 32-19, and you look at the same very exact item number 2, it says, it describes use group 10, and it says in number 2, are not appropriate in local shopping or local service areas because of generation of considerable pedestrian, automobile, or truck traffic. So what caused the traffic generation here?
What's the size?
Is it the store, the retail, or it's the entire?
Because it's serving a wider area, ranging from community to the whole metropolitan area, and therefore appropriate signage. So it's serving an entire metropolitan area. So more vehicles from far reaches are going to come there, which is going to generate a lot more traffic and congestion as opposed to a local retail that is contained in a very small geographic area, and the circulation is limited to the people living there and coming there and going there. It's primarily for that.
And this is actually what the appellant is arguing, that the prefatory paragraph in the use group 10 is what's describing this proposed store, whereas the proposed store is use group 6, which is described as servicing a smaller area, right? That's their argument. And the question is, do we look at that introductory paragraph and ignore the definition of variety store, which says a variety store is 10,000 square feet of floor area or less, right? Or do we ignore the definition of floor area, right? And so my question to both the DOB and to the appellant is, explain to us when, and I think DOB responded because the courts have looked at this very question, explain to us when we are to regard more heavily the introductory paragraph as opposed to the clear text, the instruction in the text that says what to do. And the courts have decided on that and said that you don't need to prove that you are one of those things in that introductory paragraph in order to be one of those uses on the list, on the allowable list. Okay? So, and I think that's why the Home Depot case was cited in the papers of, I think of at least the DOB and perhaps the owner. The Home Depot case was a question where the DOB had to come up with a use for Home Depot, which at the time was a new type of use. So it did have to consider these introductory statements, and when it was appealed to the BSA looked at these introductory statements very carefully to decide what the Home Depot really was, right? So, okay.
The other thing, why, during the permitting process, why didn't the DOB look at Target or the store proposed as a department store? Is it because you didn't know that it's going to be a Target there, or you knew and you just decided that this is not a department store, it's just a variety retail?
It's the applicant.
So I think normally the Department of Buildings does not require applicants to disclose specific retail tenants. They list their use groups. In this case, consistent with case law, because the Department of Buildings is aware of which tenant will occupy, we are discussing the specific target. But the Department of Buildings stand by its approval that this target is a variety store. City Planning has weighed in and said targets provide a variety of goods that meet, I think, a federal Department of Commerce definition of variety store. And I just want to add one other thing. So the Department of Buildings stands by its determination that this is a variety store. But BSA itself has said that some uses can be two different uses. So some uses could be both a variety store and a department store. Of course, in a zoning district where only one of those is allowed, the applicant would have no choice but to identify as the conforming use. But the department stands by the determination that this Target is a variety store.
Just to clarify, in the permit application, it's the applicant who states the use group. It's not DOB that states the use group?
The applicant states the use group, and then the department approves the applicant's application.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think the owner's representative.
Can I respond on the point about the preference?
You'll have a chance to respond after everyone else has spoken. Thank you.
Please state your name for the record.
Richard Leland of Ackerman LLP for the owners. I don't think I have to spend a lot of time here. I think that the building department of Buildings has made it clear. Counsel for Target has made it very clear in its writings, and it was counsel for Target that recited the Applebaum case, not I.
Okay.
In response to Commissioner Shada, there's been a concession by the appellant here today that this is a variety store, that they're not challenging the designation as a variety store. I think that should be clarified and emphasized on the record. We agree with what's been said here with respect to the absolute authority of the Raritan case, a case I've cited many times, not always successfully, but have tried to use in matters dealing with the board. And all I do is ask that if there are further submissions, that we be given copies and an opportunity to respond.
Sure. Certainly.
And for the record, I understood that the appellant didn't challenge the definition of the subjects.
But she conceded it today that she doesn't challenge it, unless I misheard her.
Maybe she let her speak for herself. Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Any
and, yeah, the Target's representative?
Mr. Mazur?
God, still morning. Good morning, members. Jesse Mazur from Fox Rothschild. We're counsel to Target. Similar to Mr. Leland, I would say that we watched and attended your executive session. We submitted our papers. We agree with the arguments made at the Department of Buildings and echoed by Mr. Leland, and I would only make the single observation that it sounds to me that the people who brought on this case perhaps today got off at the wrong subway stop. They need to be going to 120 Broadway. They are seeking a change in the zoning resolution that is not really within the jurisdiction of your board. I think the regulations and the zoning resolution are clear, and its enforcement has been consistent. And when it has been a little bit off, the court has given you instructions. I don't believe there is a controversy truly before you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, should we let counsel respond, and then we'll have speakers?
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for everybody for staying. I know some folks have to get to work. I just want to respond specifically to the point about the prefatory statements in the zoning resolution. The courts have consistently given deference to this board in how it uses those statements as guidance, right? And it has consistently said so. Quoting selectively from Applebaum, one could say that the court said throw those out, but it's actually not what happened in that case at all. The Board of Standards and Appeals considered the prefatory statements and decided that in total, I believe it was an embassy-related nonprofit, fit the definition, and the court deferred. And in the Home Depot case, the board again looked at the prefatory statements for the two use groups that Home Depot might fit into, and again, the court deferred to the board's treatment of those prefatory statements. The court has never said that the prefatory statements are to be ignored by this board, and the language in Applebaum specifically states that those statements are designed to give this board guidance.
Can I, on that point, can I just ask, but wasn't Raritan pretty clear that the board is not entitled to deference when its interpretation of the language is contrary to the plain meaning of that language? So sure, the board can get deference for interpreting 3255 is a conditioned precedent, but if that language is in fact contrary to the definition of variety store or the definition of floor area, is the board still permitted to rely on that language?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but I do know that variety stores are not actually defined in the zoning resolution, and this board, and we absolutely have not conceded that Target is not trying to sneak a department store into a district where they're not allowed.
You did say that that's not what we're discussing. That's not before us today.
No, I said, I actually, when my opening statement, invited this board to do an investigation, but that's not a legal issue, right? That's not an issue I can present on. You'll hear from the public about the impacts of Target. We can absolutely look at that, but since Target has tried to stick themselves.
Sorry, it's actually not before us.
Great, okay.
But
we have not, we have absolutely.
Question of floor area in the cellar, right?
Great.
That's what we're reviewing.
We're discussing today, absolutely, but we have not conceded that a Target is not a department store, and that this 23,000 square foot Target retail destination is not a department store. Unfortunately, those terms are not defined in the zoning resolution.
Okay.
Want to take speakers?
But I just want to pick up on what Ms. Monroe said. Because in Raritan we were given such clear instructions, do not look behind a clear meaning in the text. You need to brief clearly why we are allowed to look beyond the clear meaning in the text. In what situations we would be allowed to do that. Okay.
Great, thank you.
So we'll have public speakers.
I understand there's people from the representatives of the electeds. Those will come first, please.
Please state your name, whom you're representing.
Hello, my name is Laura Rubio. I represent State Senator Jessica Ramos from the 13th District. I'm going to read her statement. I respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in district. Sorry, I have a cold. Located in districts that limit retail use of Group 6, even if they are underground. Today, you're hearing about a planned regional destination for shopping at 4031 82nd Street in East Elmhurst, Queens. It is zoned R6/C1. This is my neighborhood. I've grown up, lived, and I'm raising my children in this community, and I am also the proud state senator of a vast area north of the proposed site. Sorry. Adding destination retail to any part of the district that is zoned and used as residential area will not only negatively impact my family and I, but it will have detrimental effects on the people and communities I represent. The area I represent is a district with no hospitals that depends on two one-way streets surrounding the proposed Target site as thoroughfares for ambulances to reach Elmhurst Hospital just a block away. Our ambulance response time, especially in East Elmhurst, are dangerously long, and traffic that would come along with Target as a tenant would exacerbate our healthcare access. The wait time for my constituents, particularly in the northern parts of the district, to get to ambulances are at an all-time high. This is unacceptable as is, but with the traffic congestion that a new retail destination will bring to the neighborhood, the wait time will increase exponentially. People's access to life-saving services will be at risk. I have seen ambulances leaving and attempting to go to Elmhurst Hospital get stuck in traffic on 82nd Street and Baxter Avenue, even before the construction of the development began. The negative impact that Target will have on my neighborhood will go beyond congestion, but will also place a huge burden on the already overcrowding and failing public transportation system. We need to reinvest in our communities and public transportation before corporations. A national chain will also affect the way that my neighbors and constituents are able to afford housing. As a lifelong renter, I know firsthand the struggles of being able to afford rent, and these burdens would only heighten with big box commercial real estate moving into the neighborhood. I fear that my family and neighbors will be displaced when we can no longer afford rent. Displacement pressures will increase the need for my office to provide constituent services and distract from other community needs which we could be addressing. Mom and pop shops that make our community one of the most diverse in the country unique, and they will not have a chance. I know that rents go up I know that as rents go up in commercial spaces in the area, my office will see an increase to provide counseling to businesses trying to stay in the neighborhood to serve the people who live there. I urge you to do the right thing and keep oversized variety stores out of our small, thriving small businesses corridors and residential neighborhoods. Space in our growing community is limited. We are in need of dire services and infrastructure that would benefit from the location of this site. As such, I am urging you to reinstate the stop work order until the site is in compliance. Thank you for the board's consideration.
Thank you. Can you submit that letter, if you haven't already, into the record?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was submitted. Okay.
There was a statement about the stop work order. That has nothing to do with us. That was your appeal to the court for a TRO, right?
No, that was the Department of Buildings. But then they pulled the stop work order.
Oh, okay.
There was a challenge,
yeah. Yeah, okay, that was,
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Are there any other?
Good morning. My name is Robin Ennis, and I'm speaking today on behalf of New York State Assembly Member Catalina Cruz, representing the 39th District. I am her Chief of Staff. I respectfully request that you and your colleagues uphold the regulation that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to use group 6, even if they are underground. Today, you are hearing about a planned regional destination for shopping at 40-31 82nd Street in Elmhurst, Queens. It is zoned R6/C1. This is my neighborhood. I am a longtime resident of Jackson Heights, Elmhurst, and the Corona community. As the New York State Assembly member serving the district that this development is located within, I am obligated to protect the interests of my constituents, who include thousands of small business owners as well as residents. The zoning of this property allows only for local use only, and the target corporation is seeking special permission to evade the law. The BSA needs to apply the law equally and force any retail at this property to be less than 10,000 square feet and serve local needs. The zoning law is written to protect small businesses and communities from overdevelopment. The developer's pre-existing lease with the target corporations and plans for the development have already caused spikes in commercial rent for the small business owners on 82nd Street, where a number of small businesses have already shuttered due to the construction of this project. I have personally witnessed ambulance leaving and attempting to go to Elmhurst Hospital, stuck in traffic for unreasonable and inordinate periods of time on 82nd Street and Baxter Avenue. I believe with the building of this regional destination mall in the target location, congestion will be exacerbated immeasurably. On March 13th, 2018, I attended and delivered testimony alongside nearly 200 community members to Community Board 4 regarding the rezoning proposal for this site, stating that a target of this size and the proposal of housing at the site would severely limit community members' ability to access Elmhurst Hospital. I also highlighted the threat of displacement this corporate chain store would pose to the small business community. On May 23, 2018, I delivered testimony to the City Planning Commission during a public hearing planned for the development. This testimony highlighted the grave danger the development would pose to the community's ability to access Elmhurst Hospital, especially given the developer's plans to create a large parking lot with 2 car elevators for what is intended to be a transit-oriented development. On July 5th, 2018, I spoke at a press conference outside of Elmhurst Hospital organized by Queens Neighborhoods United. This press conference was attended by 30 members of the community and was intended to highlight the dangers of the development. I listened to dozens of community members give testimony about the congestion and danger this development would bring for over an hour, including testimony from medical staff from Elmhurst Hospital and the vice president of the uniformed EMTs, paramedics, and fire inspectors, Local 2507. My constituents are also renters and residents whose ability to commute and walk through the neighborhood safely will be impacted by this regional mall. With construction at the site already blocking 1 lane on Baxter Avenue, I have seen pedestrian traffic that would otherwise be on the sidewalk dangerously rerouted to the street. With the planned online shopping pickup services that Target plans to offer at this site, Thousands of shoppers and people from other neighborhoods will surely visit this location, making this a regional destination. It will increase the burden on our already severely overtaxed bus and subway lines, the Q29, Q32, Q33 buses, and the 7 train. With the 128 parking spaces planned, it will fill the streets with car traffic, and out-of-neighborhood foot traffic will push the residents into the street. In sum, the zoning law exists for a reason, and it should be applied here without prejudice or favor to major corporations. I urge you to do the right thing and keep oversized variety stores out of our thriving small business corridors and residential neighborhoods. Thank you and your colleagues for considering.
Thank you.
Anyone else representing elected officials or an elected official? That's it? Okay, so you can start coming up one by one. I think you're coming in order. 3 minutes each. Please state your name for the record. So you want to start coming up?
Good morning, board. My name's Arianna Martinez. This is my neighborhood. I live about 4 blocks away from this location, and I commute from the 82nd Street 7 train to my job at LaGuardia Community College, where I'm a professor of urban studies. The area around the planned development is a thriving residential district with many small shops that are run by residents and serve neighborhood needs, shops that exemplify, quote, local retail as the drafters of the zoning resolution meant it when they wrote the definition of use, Group 6. A giant variety store will exacerbate traffic congestion and already overcrowded 7 train, affecting access to Elmhurst Hospital and putting the safety of our community at risk. This is exactly the kind of congestion that the drafters of the zoning resolution meant to protect residential neighborhoods from. Some of the reasons I moved to this neighborhood 7 years ago were for the vibrant street life, the cultural diversity, and the mix of amenities. I do not want this mall to be built in our community because the surrounding infrastructure was not designed for a mall and the transit is already at capacity. Furthermore, a mall will change the way local residents shop in the neighborhood, jeopardizing the survival of small businesses and our local economy. In the last 20 years, I have been disappointed to see the homogenization of many Manhattan and Brooklyn commercial corridors and neighborhoods. Again and again, malls, big box stores, and chain stores have displaced small businesses and in turn created empty storefronts. Your decision matters for Jackson Heights and Elmhurst, but also for the whole city. I urge you to do the right thing. Thank you for considering our issues.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker.
Good morning to the board.
Please state your name.
My name is Nestor David Pastor. As a lifelong resident of Queens with an immigrant background rooted in Latin America, I write in opposition to this cynical attempt to evade existing zoning regulations in service of a corporation that already has an outsized influence in New York City. On a personal note, the area surrounding the proposed Target development has deep symbolic and historical value for Queens residents like me. Less than 2 blocks away is where my father first arrived to New York from Peru to live with his older brothers. It's where he began his journey as the city was going bankrupt and waves of immigrants established communities in spite of the severe economic crisis. Decades later, this part of Queens is still where new arrivals begin their journey. Many, like my father, will work a number of jobs, start their own businesses, and invest their livelihoods in Queens in a way Target never will. So when I visit this part of Queens and patronize the small businesses along Roosevelt Avenue and the streets bordering the development, I feel closer to that history and to the many different cultures that inform my background as a proud, lifelong resident of Queens. So that's all I have to say, and thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, dear board and dear Chair Permert. My name is Leandra Requena. I am an immigrant from Peru who has lived in Queens for 40 years. I respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to use Group 6, even if they are underground. As a tax-paying citizen and a small business owner, I wish for these monstrous commercial developments to be stopped. Developments like this one raise our residential and commercial rents. Developers build big and rent to corporations like Target, who hurt small business owners like myself because we are so small in comparison. Corporations like Target cannot be loyal to our community because they are not from the community. A destination retail store will put my livelihood at stake. This site is zoned for small business like myself, not for regional destinations or an other boroughs attraction as advertised. Small business owners like myself get no breaks. We have to follow the law closely, or we get penalized in ways that big corporations do not. The accelerated rates of gentrification and undesired zoning across the city are unbelievable. Do these developers and Target realize there is a hospital just down the block? It is already hard to drive to the hospital. More people could die with increased traffic. There's already a lot of buses getting stuck along 82nd, and a giant variety store will only make the worse. I encourage you and the board to do the right thing and decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail users to use Group 6, even if they are underground. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Do you want to submit your testimony, ma'am? Can you please?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Thank you. Just keep coming. When one speaker finishes, you can just keep coming up.
Yeah.
How you do, folks? I'm speaking on behalf of a displaced small business owner named Meme. So, in which her letter stated, I was speaking.
Can you state your name though, too?
Oh, first name is Jay, last name is Koo, Jaykoo.
I have you.
Thank you. I respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to use Group 6, even if they are underground. Furthermore, a giant variety store will eventually exacerbate traffic congestions, affecting access to Elmhurst hospitals, putting safety of our communities at first, but most importantly in this letter, create rent increases and real estate speculations. My store, Meme Discount and Gift Store, was located at 40-32 82nd Street, Elmhurst, at a storefront that I rented for about 10 years. I renewed the lease every year, where for the first 9 years, rent went up about 2% each year, increasing from $6,000 in 2008 to $7,000 in 2016. On September 2017, when I asked for lease renewal, the landlord shot up my rent up to $10,000. A $3,000 increase when I asked why. My landlord stated verbatim that Target is coming and this is a luxury block. And there'll be more luxury apartments here. Now, the luxury apartment was part of the original plan with the rezoning. Since the rezoning was overturned and defeated, the landlord brought the rent back down to $7,000, but no lease moving forward. As he shared, Target might bring in more affluent people, and we want to make space for newer and shinier stores, verbatim from the landlord. Fearing the landlord will increase the rent at his discretion, I, Meme, decided to close the store in September 2018. Today, the store still sits vacant. If you do not enforce Group 6, you are paving the way for unregulated underground variety stores to be built on residential neighborhoods throughout the city, forcing small businesses like my own to close because we cannot afford the rent increases that come with such development. We urge you to do the right thing. Keep the variety stores out of the thriving small businesses corridor. So, in statement short, please do not target small businesses for future displacement. Take May's story as a casualty that was lost, but as a lesson learned for future protection for small businesses, and definitely no to target. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you. Next speaker.
And I already submitted the statement in the email.
Great, thank you.
Next speaker.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lucy Block. I submitted written testimony. That's not what I'm going to be reading out. I'm a resident of Elmhurst. I live about an 8-minute walk. I'm also trained as an urban planner. I got my degree in urban planning from Hunter CUNY, and I've specialized in zoning and land use. I have to say I'm really dismayed to hear the kind of debate over legal technicalities in this way that totally contradicts common sense. I heard Commissioner Shida bring up the common sense argument, which is that it is absurd to say that a 10,000 square foot development above ground is fine and has a normal amount of impacts in a neighborhood, and 20,000 square feet of a national chain department store placed underground has, as if that has no impacts in the neighborhood. I understand that the square footage calculations count towards the parking requirement, but this conversation that was had earlier just presupposes that, you know, pedestrian traffic is nothing, that people coming in on subways and buses is nothing, and that, you know, it totally ignores the issue of the corporatization of 82nd Street in a neighborhood that is fueled by the immigrant communities there. The Jackson Heights and Elmhurst is an example of kind of the most vibrant possible New York City diverse economy that you could find. I don't think there's a neighborhood like it in New York City. And from an urban planning perspective, to allow a major corporation to circumvent the, you know, anything that is common sense about our zoning, the fact that this is a commercial overlay zone, which is geared towards neighborhoods serving retail. Obviously, the 82nd Street bid has already undermined that. This would allow it to undermine it further. So I'm asking you to think about sensible urban planning, sensible urban policy, and I know that some people will frame this as like a NIMBY, like we don't want development in our neighborhood. It's really absurd because this is about the immigrants who live in Queens, the immigrants that make our city run, who are being attacked on a daily basis from multiple levels of government that the city has not shown sufficient respect for. So as an urban planner, as a resident, I ask you to think about the context, the neighborhood, and the fact that this site was should have been landmarked. It was a historic movie theater that showed Bollywood films with Spanish subtitles. I don't think you're going to find anywhere else in the city that has that. Now it's being used as a giant pit that's going to put a Target underground. So,
thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Leticia Chol. I'll be submitting my statement today. My name is Leticia Chol, and I live in East Elmhurst, but spend most of my time in Jackson Heights. I was born and raised here. I respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that the variety store over 10,000 square feet not be located in a district that limits retail use, Group 6, even if they're underground. Today, you'll hear a lot of folk stories about why this development is irresponsible and illegal. This lot is very clearly not meant to accommodate a big box store like Target and turning it into a mall that is meant to attract more people from outside of the neighborhood, endangering our community. I'm really going to talk mostly about how Elmhurst Hospital is very important in my community. I'm going to share a lot of personal stories. Like myself, I use Elmhurst Hospital not just for the emergency room purposes, but for the community centers that they have. You know, I treat my postpartum depression in Elmhurst Hospital. I go twice a week, one for individual and one for group therapy. My mom, she gets her treatment there. She sees her doctor for a tumor that they found in her cervix, so she has to go every 3 months to monitor it as well. Elmhurst Hospital is really used by a lot of people. They do drug addiction, inpatient, outpatient information. They provide medical information in every language that you could think of, you know, because it's Jackson Heights. We just don't speak English and Spanish. It's like 120-something languages in my neighborhood, you know. I also do want to share a story. When my son was 1 year old, he suffered like a cerebral seizure. I live in East Elmhurst by LaGuardia Airport, so we also have a development over there happening. When that happened, my son, his face turned purplish white, like color, you know. And I really thought he died in my arms because he wasn't even responding. He wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. I'm sorry. I called the ambulance right away. It took forever to come, you know, because due to traffic from LaGuardia, due to traffic just regular. I called the cab. Once we reached 82nd and Northern Boulevard, it stopped in traffic. Then, you know, and having your son, like I'm a first-time mother, having my son not move, it was really scary, so I was like, please hurry up, please hurry up. Once we got to 82nd and 37, I just got off the cab and I ran to the hospital because I'm not gonna wait there thinking that my son was dead. My son is fine, thankfully, you know, although my situation wasn't a life and death situation, but it was a really scary situation. I do want you to know that I'm pretty sure you know Elmhurst Hospital is a trauma level 1 center. They accept 911 calls. If you looked at the news recently, an NYC police officer was taken there, I apologize, was taken there for a gunshot wound in the head, you know.
If you could wrap.
I'm submitting my statement, and thank you very much, and I appreciate your time. Please don't allow Target, you know. Thank you.
Are we going to take a break, or?
10 minutes.
Okay.
Next speaker? 11:51.
Next 10 minutes.
Okay.
Unless you're done.
Hello,
Unless-
good morning.
No, not done.
My name is Pia Patwari, and I live across the street from the development site. This destination retail is harmful to the predominantly immigrant neighborhoods of Elmhurst, Jackson Heights, and Corona and surrounding neighborhoods. It draws more attraction to us and leaves us vulnerable to displacement as landlords look for tenants who can afford their rapidly increasing rent. We hold our community dear as we struggle just to survive in the same neighborhoods we grew up in. Living across the street from this site, to say the least, is depressing. I'm faced with a constant reminder that people who look like me are not welcome here anymore. In addition, the roads adjacent to the site are now half as wide as they used to be, and the traffic is unbearable. The corner of Hampton Street and 40th Avenue does not have traffic lights, and now that tightly packed road prevents traffic from moving more freely, and that is extremely dangerous for people living around the area, especially young children, like my little cousins who attend PS 89 down the block, and older people. Looking at this development through a legal lens, large development stores cannot be exempt from the law. Local zoning only permit retail for local uses which serve local consumer needs, such as laundromats, clothing stores, delis, small produce stores, which, by the way, was one of the few businesses that existed before the developers closed it down, and so much more. If you do not enforce the rules of Use Group 6, you are paving a way for unregulated underground variety stores to be built in the residential neighborhoods throughout the city, putting the safety of our community and infrastructure at risk. I encourage you and the board to do the right thing and decide that underground variety stores over 10,000 square feet should not be allowed in the residential districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Eleanor Batchelder. I have a little cough. A resident of Jackson Heights. For some time now, developers have been pushing to build a large store in our neighborhood. Today, we ask that you enforce against them a zoning regulation that prohibits large variety stores in local shopping areas like ours. The developers propose that by putting 2 retail floors underground, they will be able to ignore this zoning. Personally, this doesn't make sense to me. How will a large variety store have a different effect on the local retail environment simply by putting it underground and removing all the windows? Now, we find that in fact they have no interest at all in local shopping. They plan to create a regional destination store. I looked this up. Quote, a destination store is a retail operation that consumers find so attractive that they are willing to make a special trip solely for the purpose of shopping there, even if the distance or location is not convenient. Actually, a destination store underground sounds like a joke, unless they intend to make basement a desirable feature. Perhaps they will decorate it as a grotto or a cave, hoping to attract thrill-seeking shoppers. Or perhaps they are just trying to evade the clear intent of the zoning regulations. Consider that this area of Queens does not need or want a destination store. There are already several nearby. The giant Queens Center Mall is about 10 minutes away by bus, and the Main Street Flushing downtown shopping district is 20 minutes away by subway. Either of these sounds more attractive to shoppers than an underground grotto. We fear that the more customers this store attracts, the worse it will be for our neighborhood. The small local streets here will not support great increases in traffic, such as from hordes of new customers and large trailer trucks bringing in stock. Emergency services say that more congestion could worsen access to nearby Elmhurst Hospital, putting our safety at risk. Another reason why these zoning rules exist is probably that such a large store with a wider inventory will create unfair competition for existing local stores, which are struggling to stay open despite rising rents. Did you know that small shops like these provide 30% of the jobs in our community? And their workers are people just like their customers. Many are immigrants who primarily use languages other than English. It's a great arrangement, and one we want to protect. So we are here to urge you to maintain the current zoning. Don't let the builders think that they will be able to ignore the regulations if only they dig deep enough. Lost my place. If you do not enforce the rules in this case, you may pave the way for this kind of unregulated underground stores in residential neighborhoods all over the city, destabilizing local economies and making life worse for the residents. We ask that you do the right thing.
Wow.
Next speaker, please. Also, just to note, we take a break every 2 hours, and that's in approximately 4 minutes. So maybe after the speaker, we'll take a 10-minute break. That'll be it, but 10 minutes.
Peter Johnson. I live 2 subway stops on the 7th from the building site. I'm not going to elaborate on anything in the text that I submitted in view of the preceding speakers and in the time limitation. However, let me conclude with the following. This site is highly unsuitable for subterranean use as requested. Indeed, one needs little imagination to envision that were such development allowed, the next owner of the structure might find it most profitable to place a mega church, pinball parlor, casino, or similar facility wildly at variance from what the area can effectively sustain. This audacious avoidance of city zoning should be denied, for it wholly lacks in merit for this particular site, and even more importantly, will establish a precedent whereby other neighborhoods will be subjected to similar schemes to defy the intent and reason behind planned zoning resolution. Thank you for considering these objections and those of my neighbors and the implications that this building scheme imposes upon the entire city. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to take one more speaker?
No, I think we just take the break. It's 11:58. We might as well just do it.
Okay, so we're going to take a 10-minute break.
Take back on the record in 10 minutes.
10 minutes. It's good for everyone to stand up. That's why we take breaks.
On, please.
Microphones are on. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, back on the record. This is the Board of Standards and Appeals special public hearing for March 7, 2019. We'll continue with the public testimony. Please come forward, and you'll have 3 minutes. Please state your name for the record. I'm sorry, Counsel, did you want to say something first?
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Honorable Chair, my name is Angsha Karka. I'm a community organizer at DRUM. I respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail users to use Group 6, even if they are underground. At the hearing on March 7, you will hear about a planned regional destination for shopping at 4031 82nd Street, aka 4019 82nd Street, Queens Block 1493, Lot 15 in Elmhurst, Queens. It is zoned R6/C1. This is our neighborhood in many, many ways. Our office is located at 7218 Roosevelt Avenue, Jackson Heights, New York, 11372, 9 blocks away from the proposed site. I work with an organization called Drum Desi's Rising Up and Moving, and we are a membership-based organization of low-income South Asian and Indo-Caribbean immigrants, workers, and youth. Drum has existed for 19 years. At least 10 Drum members and 1 Drum staff live within 2 blocks of where Target is attempting to open the retail destination in a residential neighborhood. An additional 20 members and 2 Drum staff live within 5 blocks of the proposed site. Our organization is one of the petitioners in this case. The arrival of congestion-generating destination retail will have a detrimental impact on the lives of our members who live in the surrounding neighborhoods of Jackson Heights and Elmhurst, particularly those who reside within a 6-block radius of the proposed development site. Members residing in the immediate area will suffer direct consequences of the addition of destination retail in the form of increased congestion and traffic on the neighborhood sidewalks and streets. By adding more cars to the streets and more pedestrians to the sidewalks, the development will exacerbate the already congested intersections at Baxter and 82nd Street and Roosevelt and 82nd Streets, increasing risk to pedestrians and traffic safety. The addition of high-traffic destination retail to the neighborhood will increase existing overcrowding on the 7, E, F, M, and R lines, likely resulting in significant delays in travel time for area residents. Our local members will suffer from delays in accessing medical services at Elmhurst Hospital due to the increased congestion. Ambulances going to and from the hospital will encounter gridlock streets as a result of increased traffic in the vicinity of the development, resulting in potentially life-threatening delays. With an increased numbers of shoppers, cars waiting to drop and pick up people up, and supply trucks for a big retailer, the pathway for ambulances and traffic will be completely blocked, causing risk for patients going to the hospital, especially for those needing care at the Level 1 Trauma Center. Our members rely on this hospital for medical care, and they will suffer directly from these congestion-related consequences. Our members residing in the area will also suffer indirect consequences. The addition of high-traffic retail will likely result in increased speculation in the housing market, posing a serious risk to housing stability. When rents go up, our members will be forced to double up in their apartments or leave the neighborhood. This will have serious ramifications on access to jobs, educational resources, cultural institutions, and their places of worship, as well as access to services provided in their language. In short, I want to say that our neighborhood is at capacity with regards to transit, mobility, hospital access, and congestion. This proposed development will push into beyond capacity. Your decision matters for the whole city because it impacts how commercial development in our neighborhoods is regulated. If you do not enforce the rules of use Group 6, you're paving the way for unregulated underground variety stores to be built in residential neighborhoods. I urge you to do the right thing and keep oversized variety stores out of our thriving neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next speaker, please.
Next speaker.
Good morning to the board. My name is Courtney Sermanek. I've submitted my written testimony. I respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to use Group 6, even if they are underground. My family has called this area of Queens for 4 generations. My maternal and paternal great-grandparents immigrated here. I have memories growing up here, and I now live a 15-minute walk away from this proposed development. I teach visual art and theater programs in Elmhurst, Queens at PS/IS 102 and Pan American International High School, with middle school and high school students that will be deeply impacted. The site is supposed to only house local or small businesses according to zoning law. The developers cited at the City Planning Commission on May 23, 2018, that they intend to use this development, they intend this development to be used as a regional destination or an outer boroughs destination. Mine and my students' regular hospital is Elmhurst Hospital. Ambulances regularly use Baxter Avenue to access the hospital, and Elmhurst Hospital is one of the only Level 1 trauma centers in the city. The traffic and congestion generated by an oversized variety store could harm access to the hospital, putting the safety of our community members and my students at risk. My students, specifically those at Pan American International High School, walk to school on that block. If the neighborhood becomes a retail destination, it will limit people's ability to walk around on the sidewalks, most especially for people with limited mobility who live in nearby apartments and shop on the block. I use the 7 train daily, and so do my students. The 7 train is already overcrowded. An oversized retail store that the developers are marketing as a regional destination will only make the overcrowding worse, especially for people who rely on the subway to get to work, have limited mobility, or ride with children. Large department stores cannot be exempt from the law. I encourage you and the board to do the right thing and decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to use group 6, even if they are underground. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day, my name is Sarah Feldman. I'm a resident of Elmhurst. I'll be speaking on behalf of McCartney Morris. Dear Chair and colleagues, my name is McCartney Morris. While I live in nearby Astoria, at least once a week I'm in this neighborhood visiting friends or attending community meetings. I respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet not be located in districts that limit retail uses to use group 6, even if they're underground. 4031 82nd Street in Elmhurst is supposed to only house local or small businesses according to zoning law. The developers cited at the City Planning Commission on May 23, 2018, that they intend this development to be used as a regional destination or an outer boroughs attraction. As a resident of Queens and a longtime transit advocate, I am all too aware of how overburdened and poorly designed the streets of this borough are. For too long, Queens has been designed only for cars, cars, and more cars. Whether it's treating our streets as byways for commuters between Manhattan and Long Island suburbs, subjecting Queens residents to speeding drivers and asthma-causing pollution, or zoning that adds unneeded parking capacity, thereby encouraging more driving and delaying the installation of proper rail transit or high-functioning buses, this borough has been neglected and poorly treated by its urban planners and developers for too long. Simply put, new development in Queens in the year 2019 should not add parking capacity. In the age of climate change and extreme sustainability efforts, New York City should be focused on removing parking capacity from our buildings and our streets. Any building that would bring either 51 to 55 new parking spots, as zoning would require, or 128 new parking spots, as is being proposed, simply incentivizes and encourages residents to own cars and out-of-area shoppers to drive to the building. The developers of this parcel themselves have admitted that they are targeting metro area shoppers to drive to the building and that the only way to access the subcellar parking lot will be via a 2-car elevator on Baxter Avenue. This will only result in more congestion on our streets, adding pollution and endangering residents. These dangers are even more pronounced when you factor in the nearby hospital. This setup just doesn't belong in our dense, transit-adjacent neighborhoods. In addition, big box stores don't belong in our dense neighborhoods. Even putting aside the possibility of harm due to displacement of small businesses, big box stores bring large, dangerous, and often illegal trucks and trailers to our streets, endangering all street users. From speeding to double parking to driving off truck routes, oversized delivery trucks and trailers are a menace on the city's streets. Moreover, at previous hearings, the developers have said they plan to stop traffic each time a truck loading commercial inventory for the mall needs to back in and out of the loading dock, located right next to the car elevators. This situation flies in the face of New York City's Vision Zero efforts to reduce and eliminate traffic injuries and deaths for pedestrians, cyclists, and other road users. But regardless of the demerits of this plan, current law is clear. City building laws do not allow such big stores at this site. Only businesses that serve local needs and are smaller than 10,000 square feet are allowed, and the proposed target, whether above or below ground, very clearly fits neither definition. Your decision matters for the whole city because it impacts how commercial development in residential districts is regulated. Thank you, and please keep Target out of our neighborhoods.
Thank you. Next speaker,
please.
Sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Yekaterina Bezborodko. I used to live for many years a block away from this proposed development, but today I'm here to read a statement on behalf of my graduate center colleague, Samuel Stein. My name is Samuel Stein. I teach urban studies at Hunter College, study urban geography at the CUNY Graduate Center, and write extensively about urban planning politics. I am writing today to respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to use Group 6, even if they are underground. For years, I lived a short distance from 4031 82nd Street and remain active in neighborhood political and social life, particularly around planning issues. On a personal level, this decision matters to me in terms of setting a precedent that our zoning code should be used to protect, rather than threaten, small businesses which are facing a crisis throughout the city. This site used to be a much beloved movie theater whose presence on the block brought customers to the surrounding stores. The proposed development would do just the opposite. Either drive away potential customers who would be deterred by the crowdedness of the street, or pull customers who otherwise would shop at multiple small businesses into a single Target store. Your decision matters for the whole city because it impacts how commercial development in residential districts is regulated. If you do not enforce the rules of Use Group 6, you are paving the way for unregulated underground variety stores to be built in residential neighborhoods throughout the city, putting the safety of our communities and infrastructure at risk. I urge you to do the right thing and keep oversized variety stores out of our thriving small business corridors and residential neighborhoods. The purpose of the site zoning is quite clear. All I am asking you and your colleagues to do today is to vote to uphold it as a space for local retail rather than allow an international corporation to set up shop in a way that will surely put local retail out of business. Thank you and your colleagues for considering. Sincerely, Samuel Stein.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Katie. I live in Queens. But
What's
I'm
your
also
last name?
Katie Zhang.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm speaking on behalf of Sonia Munshi, though. She, I think, already submitted written testimony. And here to ask to keep Target out of our neighborhoods. This planned regional destination is in my neighborhood and my community. I grew up in Sunnyside and have lived in Jackson Heights for the last decade, along with my mother, aunt, cousins, nieces, and nephews. For us, as South Asian migrants and children of immigrants, this area of Queens has been a place to grow community alongside our Latina, East Asian, and other migrant neighbors. The commercial strips in these neighborhoods, made up of family-owned businesses and community-based organizations, have been absolutely vital to our ability to build friendships, networks, and a home. I'm deeply concerned about the impact of this planned development on our collective health and well-being for many reasons. One is that the traffic increase will impact our access to Elmhurst Hospital, the local emergency room, and one of the only level 1 trauma centers in the city. With big trailers going to and from the store, it'll be harder for ambulances to reach the hospital. I have been to this emergency room many times as both a patient and a caregiver. My father was taken to the ER in an ambulance under such dire circumstances that a traffic delay could have cost him his life. We need secure and clear access to Elmhurst Hospital. The traffic and congestion generated by an oversized variety store would put the safety of our community at risk, regardless of whatever parking requirements might be in place. Additionally, I regularly ride the 7 train to work. My elderly mother takes the 7 train to visit her elderly brother in Manhattan, and it's already difficult to get on the subway, especially during rush hour. I worry about our safety, and with an oversized variety store, more people will commute by the 7 train to shop at this store. This will produce more unsafe conditions, which will impact those of us who have to use the subway to get to work or have limited mobility and travel with children. Finally, the site is supposed to house only local or small businesses, according to zoning law. The developers cited at the City Planning Commission on May 23rd, 2018, said that they intend this development to be used as the regional destination and an outer boroughs attraction, and this will cause many smaller stores on this block to have difficulty receiving deliveries because the streets will be crowded, and they'll have to compete with the production of this larger retail store, which they cannot effectively do so. Again, this decision matters to all of New York City, not just in Elmhurst, Queens, and so I urge you to do the right thing and keep this store out of our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Ospina. I am part of the queer, Colombian, and working class communities in the neighborhood that are in fear of extinction if the planned regional destination is built, because it will raise commercial and residential rents, which will displace many members of these intersecting communities. Community centers that are already vulnerable will have to close their doors, and marginalized folks in these communities won't have places to congregate and support each other. My family uses a 7 train to get to work, and it will only get more congested and unsafe to get around. My grandmother in particular uses the buses on Roosevelt Avenue to get to her doctor's appointments, and it will only become more difficult for her due to increased traffic, which is also concerning for me because my main mode of transportation is cycling. Most of my family shopping also comes from the small immigrant-owned businesses and vendors on Roosevelt Avenue and the streets surrounding 82nd. The Mango Rico fruit stand, 99-cent store, La Gata Golosa, the list goes on. These are small businesses that are at risk if this plan is carried out. I would much rather put my money into these small businesses instead of Target, which will turn my favorite street into a desert of corporate greed. There is already a Target and a large shopping center 14 minutes away by subway or the Q29 bus across the street from the proposed site. Therefore, there is no need to build yet another gratuitous corporate retail shopping destination. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm a lifelong Queens resident. My name is Kevin Marin. I was born in Elmhurst Hospital, the infamous Elmhurst Hospital, which already suffers from a lot of traffic, as we've heard. I'm going to be reading a colleague statement, Natalia Shevin. Good morning, my name is Natalia Shevin, and I respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide the variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to use Group 6, even if they are underground. When Queensview, a limited equity housing cooperative in Astoria, opened in 1952, my great-grandparents moved in that year, and my great-grandparents moved in that year, and my grandparents followed soon after. They were drawn to a complex of 14 buildings, both represented and actualized the promise of affordable quality housing for working families. I live in Queensview now and take the 7 train to work each day. The morning and evening commutes are overcrowded, and some days multiple trains pass before there's room to get on. Infrastructure in Queens, including the 7 train that stretches from Flushing to Hudson Yards, cannot support the new influx of shoppers the proposed development would bring. Allowing underground department stores without size regulation would affect every neighborhood along the line, which would reverberate citywide through delays and congestions. Allowing big development into Jackson Heights will exacerbate this already existing issue, as well as create traffic preventing ambulances to ride safely and quickly to Elmhurst Hospital, and foreclose small businesses that sustain the economy and community of the neighborhood. Thank you for hearing my comments today.
Thank you. Next speaker. Could you sign your name, please? Because you're not on my list. Could you sign your name? Yes, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ed Wesley. I'm from the Jackson Heights Beautification Group, an organization that is celebrating our 31st year active in the neighborhood. We're an all-volunteer, not-for-profit organization, and we're a sister to Elmhurst. There was a time when my organization only concentrated on Jackson Heights, 11372, and that worked for us for a good many years. But recently, we've understood that we need to be concerned about all the neighborhoods surrounding us, and on a general level, wherever developers come in and try to destroy a neighborhood, we should get involved. I also serve on the community board. I've served on the community board for 16 years. One of our Brooklyn neighbors, Spike Lee, would be very happy to hear all the people say, do the right thing. Well, that's only coming from the residents. It's not coming from any of the lawyers representing the opposition in this case. So I point that out as an interesting note after listening to all the testimony. I would like to bring you down the road that we have journeyed to get to this spot. It all began for me and my organizations at the community board meeting community board 4 meeting, where everybody that spoke at that meeting, and yes, there were 200 people, were opposed to this kind of development. Then we moved to the Planning Commission. And I would point out 2 interesting things that happened at the Planning Commission. One was Larissa Ortiz, who sits on the planning board, asked a very basic question. They asked about the traffic study that had gone on by a reputable outfit, according to city records and experience. She asked, did you ever visit the neighborhood? The answer was no. We'd never visited the neighborhood. So she asked this next follow-on question: how could you do a traffic study without visiting the neighborhood? And their response was, we used maps. We looked at it by maps from 30,000 feet. The next question that was asked was, well, what bus routes come through that 82nd Street, Baxter Avenue corridor? They couldn't answer. They had no idea. So I would submit that the traffic study that was originally proposed was bogus, and it was probably done because of the neighborhood itself, the demographics of the neighborhood. These are basically working class people that deserve better treatment than the city has given them in years. So I would submit that I hope you will vote against this proposition and restore the neighborhood to the neighbors that you've heard today. Thank you.
Speaker, sir, could you come and sign? Because your name is not on the list.
Next speaker.
I will
Next
send
speaker.
them. Yeah.
Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Lobijan Williams. I'm a resident of Jackson Heights. I live 2 blocks away from the site. And today I will be reading a statement on behalf of Hasina Hosseini. Dear Chair and colleagues, my name is Hasina Hosseini and I am a member of Project Hajra Collective based in Queens. I respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to Group 6, even if they are underground. At the hearing on March 7th, you will hear about the planned regional destination for shopping at 4031 82nd Street in Elmhurst, Queens. It is zoned R6C1. This is our neighborhood. I was forced from this neighborhood due to high rent. I love my neighbors and I felt that this was my home. My kids went to PS2 and would use the local library. I use the Q33 buses that pick up at 82nd Street. The bus routes will be impacted due to the destination and delayed, having to compete with car and truck traffic on the narrow street. I gave this neighborhood my business and it invested in me back. I go to public classes, recreation centers, parks, Elmhurst Hospital, town halls, and public event halls. My regular hospital was Elmhurst Hospital. I am worried that it will be harder for ambulances to reach the hospital with big trailers going to and from the large store. Elmhurst Hospital is one of the only level 1 trauma centers in the city. The traffic and congestion generated by an oversized variety store could harm access to the hospital, putting the safety of our community at risk. I am someone that helped makes Queens what it is today and why it's on the radar of corporate investors. This neighborhood is still my home and I wanted to stay here. I want to come back here. Most of us will be in the same position if the destination location comes here and the Queens we have fought to build will be gone. Your decision matters for the whole city because it impacts how commercial development in residential districts in New York City is regulated. If you do not enforce the rules of Use Group 6, you are paving the way for under-regulated, underground variety stores to be built in residential neighborhoods throughout the city, putting the safety of our communities and infrastructure at risk. I urge you to do the right thing and keep out oversized variety stores from our thriving small businesses, corridors, and residential neighborhoods. Thank you and your colleagues for your consideration And sincerely, Hasina Hosseini. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Cecilia Lim. I have been a resident of Jackson Heights for the last 15 years. And with respect, I am here today to ask you to find that the variety stores that are over 10,000 square feet be found not to be able to be in districts that limit the retail uses to use Group 6, even if they're below ground level. The planned development that we're talking about is about a 15-minute walk from my home. And I frequent that area on a weekly basis, if not on a daily basis. I'm open to development that would preserve and enhance the community that already exists, which is immigrant, working class, many small businesses, some of whom you've heard from today. A giant variety store, whether located above or below ground, would change the community for the worse. I'm personally interested in this and concerned because I'm committed to my local neighbors and neighborhoods. The small businesses and families that live here make this a vibrant community and give it the character that we all love. I shop at the 82nd Fruit and Vegetable Market, the Miracali Panaderia and Pasteleria, and Mango Rico on a weekly basis. Your decision, as you've heard, matters not just for Elmhurst or Jackson Heights or Queens, but for the entire city. I've heard a lot of you, and I see by your placards that many of you are attorneys. I don't think this is a court of law. This is a different scenario. I think you have a lot of power to use. I've heard a lot of the debate today, and it's been a lot. It sounded more like a courtroom. But I think that you have more influence to use here in finding a decision and coming to a decision. And I ask that you use that to, again, find that even if the variety store is located above ground, below ground, that if it's over 10,000 feet, it doesn't belong in a zone like what Elmhurst is zoned for. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, my name is James Mongeluso. So I respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to use Group 6, even if they are underground. So zoning regulations exist in large part to protect communities from inappropriate uses of land that will likely have a negative impact on the community and surrounding areas. The proposed site of the target is in a location that's zoned for use Group 6. So I believe the intent of zoning the area in question as use Group 6 was to prioritize local retail and to prevent large retail developments that may threaten the viability of smaller businesses in the area. There are currently, as far as I know, no Target stores or Target Express stores in any areas of the city that are zoned for use Group 6. So allowing a Target with over 10,000 square feet of floor area to be operational in an area zoned for use Group 6 simply because a large portion or all of the floor area is below the ground floor doesn't fit the spirit of the use Group 6 guideline. The proposed target development will be out of scale with the rest of the community and the surrounding area. At the City Planning Commission on May 23rd of last year, the developers cited that they intend this development to be used as a regional destination or an outer boroughs attraction. A development that is described in those terms by the developers is not a development that is in line with the intended scale of a use Group 6 development. So I shop at many of the stores and the small businesses on and around Baxter Avenue and 82nd Street, including Duval Jewelry. And a regional destination store like Target will make it hard for smaller stores like Duval Jewelry to receive deliveries when the streets become more crowded with Target shoppers, larger trucks for Target deliveries. And these smaller businesses will have to now compete with a large retail store that has the advantage of scale. So allowing Target to come to our community will likely result in smaller stores going out of business and an increase in vacant commercial space. So if a use group 6 zoning designation is truly intended for prioritizing the development of small businesses, then it's clear that an increase in the number of small businesses closing and an increasing number of vacant storefronts in the area is not the goal of use group 6. So your decision here matters. And it matters for the whole city because it will impact how commercial development in residential districts throughout the city of New York will be regulated. If you do not enforce the rules of Use Group 6, you are opening up a pathway for unregulated underground variety stores to be built in residential neighborhoods throughout the city. A decision that results in allowing Target to operate on 82nd Street in Elmhurst equates to putting the safety of our communities and our infrastructure at risk. So I urge you to do the right thing and keep the oversized variety stores outside of our thriving small business corridors and residential neighborhoods. Thank you and your colleagues for considering.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lauren Burke. I live just a few stops away on the 7 line in Sunnyside, and I'll be reading a statement from Project Hadra. We, the members of the collective Project Hadra, respectfully ask you and your colleagues today to decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to use group 6, even if they are underground. Project Hadra is a collective of Queens-based migrant women and families and friends. We shop here, live here, use transportation, and use Elmhurst Hospital. Our members and families include taxi drivers, street vendors, and domestic workers. Many of us are survivors of interpersonal violence and rely on voucher systems such as Link and FEPS to live in housing, which is already limited. As Project Hadra members, we are not able to afford rent in our neighborhoods already, and we are concerned that a regional destination will not allow us to stay here. We rely on our communities being close together as an extended family network when someone is sick or when we want to celebrate in the park together. We are worried that corporate chains will displace residents in an already rent-burdened neighborhood. We are worried that this will extend to the rest of Queens and that we will lose the borough that makes it a destination in the first place. Some of our project members are survivors of interpersonal violence and rely on voucher systems to find housing. The city is not doing enough to provide 100% affordable housing, and a destination location will make it harder to find landlords to take these vouchers. Even though it's illegal for landlords to refuse us these vouchers, landlords have a lot of ways to get around this, including bullying potential applicants. In addition, while the vouchers are supposed to be around the cost of rent, a livable allowance for 4 people is considered about $1,550. It's already hard for a Project Hadra member who has these vouchers to find apartments considered a livable allowance. A destination location will ramp up these illegal tactics, and we will be priced out of a neighborhood that is already too expensive for us. Your decision matters for the whole city because it impacts how commercial development in residential districts is regulated. If you don't enforce the rules of Use Group 6, you are paving the way for unregulated underground variety stores to be built in residential neighborhoods throughout the city, putting the safety of our communities and infrastructure at risk. We urge you to do the right thing and keep oversized variety stores out of our thriving small business corridors and residential neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Evelyn Vasquez. I'm here as not only to ask for myself, but for my neighbors, because I live across the development, literally in front. So this is going to make a huge impact to my day-to-day life, as well as my neighbors who are more elderly than actual young people. This project is a huge impact to me because I'm a resident of the area, and a Target coming in would simply mean my local convenience stores would just shut down due to competitive pricing. My walk outside with my dogs would solemnly become having to watch out for amounts of people walking around my building and neighborhood. Not only this, but the pricing of my whole building is gonna rise. The whole purpose of me moving into this building was to be around people like me, my culture. What's gonna happen with the people, what's gonna happen with our culture when we have our events, when we have to go about in the streets. this is not going to be the same. It's going to be taken by people who solemnly want to come into the neighborhood to shop. I'm here just to urge you that you guys should just listen to us. You guys are, like a gentleman said, you guys are listening to the perspectives from lawyers who do not live in the area. I walk these streets every day. I commute every day. I walk my dogs every day. I see my neighbors every day. Neighbors who I have to help to walk and open the door for. People who will not be able to do that by themselves if there are always people crowding up the streets. That, not even alone with the traffic. Thank you.
Next speaker.
My name is Taylor Baker. I am a lifelong resident of Elmhurst, and it's where my family established their home when they first came to the U.S. But I'm speaking today on behalf of Lena Afridi for the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development. Dear Board, I'm writing to you in regards to a planned regional destination for shopping at 4031 82nd Street in Elmhurst, Queens, to be discussed at this hearing today, March 7th. This lot is zoned R6, C1. I live nearby in Woodside, and I'm a lifelong Queens resident. I am also the Director for Economic Development Policy at the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development. I respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to use Group 6, even if they're underground. This decision matters for the whole city because it impacts how commercial development and residential districts in New York City are regulated. If you do not enforce the rules of Use Group 6, you are paving the way for unregulated underground variety stores to be built in residential neighborhoods throughout the city, putting the safety of our communities and infrastructure at risk. I urge you to keep oversized variety stores out of our thriving small business corridors and residential neighborhoods. Small businesses across New York City face increasing displacement pressures. As ANHD has found in our upcoming report on immigrant small businesses titled The Forgotten Tenants, this is especially true in immigrant-dense communities like this one. Immigrant small businesses provide culturally relevant goods and services. They are the backbones of New York City's economy. Unfettered development presents a direct threat to our survival. Zoning is a meaningful and effective tool in maintaining the cultural character of a neighborhood and ensuring that small businesses have a chance at not only surviving, but thriving. I urge you not only to take Elmhurst neighborhood's economy into consideration when making your decision, but also consider the precedent this decision sets across the city as we face a crisis of small business development. Thank you for your consideration. Lena Afridi.
Hi, my name is Sophia Polo, but I'm reading this on behalf of Sharima Pandi. My name is Sharima, and I have been living in and around Elmhurst and Jackson Heights since 1997. My mother has worked at the Elmhurst Hospital for the past 17 years, and my father still lives in my childhood apartment off Broadway and 80th Street. I'm concerned about how a destination retail store will negatively impact the cost of living and overall livability. Elmhurst is the most rent-burdened neighborhood in Queens. My father, who lives in a rent-stabilized unit, is one among many tenants in a building that every day makes efforts to destabilize. They change the locks, they refuse to make basic repairs, they blame it all on their inability to understand their tenants' accented English. This attitude will only increase if a retail destination opens up just 2 blocks down, as the landlords will use increased property values as justification for their harassment. In addition to threatening the right to safe, affordable housing, a mall, like what is being proposed, would isolate our communities. I have been disappointed to see the likes of chain stores like Gap, Banana Republic, and Old Navy on the 82nd Commercial Strip, which used to be home to many affordable immigrant-owned and run businesses. A variety store like Target presumes to offer a little bit of everything. I work in Tribeca, where the first small format Target opened up on Greenwich. Although it has a first floor and a massive basement, I have a hard time finding the basic items at a decent price. The cheapest wine opener available was $20. The rationale may be that you can order online and pick it up in less than 24 hours, but this is not useful for the community members who do not have access to the internet, data, or credit ATM cards. I encourage you and the board to do the right thing and decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to use group 6, even if they are underground. Thank you. And on behalf of myself, I would like to say that what you're hearing, I hope you understand that allowing a Target in this space would be sending a message that this neighborhood, that this city, and this borough are no longer for the needs and the demands of vulnerable populations, of immigrants, of people of color, and that it sets a precedent for the future. Thank you.
Can I have your sign, please?
Hello, hi you guys. All right, I'm gonna try to make it really fun. My name, I'm trying to keep everybody awake, you know. My name is Jocelyn Atahualpa. I grew up shopping along 82nd, Roosevelt, Junction Boulevard ever since I moved to the U.S. in 1997. My family is one of thousands of immigrant small business owners who have fought hard to grow this commercial area in Queens. At one point, we were told that this commercial corridor needed to be revitalized as the 82nd Street Business Improvement District tried to expand. We fought back and defeated that proposal because we knew that that revitalization was not for us, but to displace us. Now we see more construction as developers buy up land and rent out to huge corporations like Target. We're here today because we are not naive, and we won't get kicked out of our communities that easily. I ask that you and your colleagues decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to use group 6, even if they are underground. I know everybody said that, but it's absurd that I have to make this clarification today. This site is zoned for small businesses like my family's 99-cent store. The developer cited at the City Planning Commission on May 23, 2018, that they intend this development to be used as a regional destination or an outer boroughs attraction. That is clearly beyond the appropriate zoning. This is also a high traffic street, both in terms of pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic. Attracting more customers that normally would not shop here means 1, more street traffic, thus increasing travel times to the hospital. 2, more overcrowding on the train. And 3, more pedestrian traffic causing an overflow onto the streets. Are we really to blame for jaywalking when the streets are so overcrowded it's impossible to get by? Large variety stores cannot be exempt from the law. If you do not enforce the rules of Use Group 6, you are paving the way for unregulated and underground variety stores to be built in residential neighborhoods throughout the city, putting the safety of our communities and infrastructure at risk. I know you guys have heard that time and time again, and I'm sure you are so tired of hearing it, but you will hear it more times again and in the future. Your decision matters for the whole city because it impacts how commercial development in residential districts in New York City is regulated. I encourage you and the board to do the right thing and decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail uses to use group 6, even if they are underground. Thank you. Jocelyn.
Good afternoon. My name is Grace Chung. I'm a Queens resident, and I'm going to read a statement by Theodora Ranelli with Project Hadra. And I'm only going to read an excerpt. My name is Theodora Ranelli, and I am a member of Project Hadra Collective based in Queens. I respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail use to use group 6, even if they are underground. At this hearing, you have heard about a planned regional destination for shopping on 82nd Street. A giant variety store in this neighborhood will exacerbate traffic congestion and the already overcrowded 7 train, affecting access to Elmhurst Hospital and putting the safety of our community at risk. This is exactly the kind of congestion that the drafters of the zoning resolution meant to protect residential neighborhoods from. Early in this hearing, you heard a lot about the 7 train. Ms. Ranelli of this statement points out specifically that this also has an impact on Access-a-Ride. She writes, I also use Access-a-Ride, and relying on service is already difficult. Congestion from the large store will make it even harder for Access-a-Ride vehicles to wait at specific pickup locations on 82nd Street. This will result in additional delayed timings and increased stress for us with limited mobility. It will also increase illness due to air congestion for those who already have suppressed or complex immune systems like myself. Your decision matters for the entire city because it impacts how commercial development in residential districts in New York City is regulated. If you do not enforce the rules of Use Group 6, you are paving the way for unregulated underground variety stores to be built in residential neighborhoods throughout the city, putting the safety of our communities and infrastructure at risk. I urge you, do the right thing and keep oversized variety stores out of our thriving small business corridors and residential neighborhoods. Thank you and your colleagues for considering.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Patricia Chow, and I'm here today to respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that the variety stores over 10,000 square feet not be located in districts that limit retail uses to Use Group 6, even if they are underground. 4031 82nd Street is about a 5-minute walk from my current home in Woodside, as well as my previous home in Jackson Heights, where I was recently displaced due to rising rent. I have done my weekly grocery shopping on 82nd Street for years now, and at nearby shops like 82 Market. When loved ones have gotten sick, I have walked them to Elmhurst Hospital and sat with them for hours, at all hours, in the perpetually packed emergency room. The immigrant communities that span Elmhurst, Corona, and Jackson Heights are my home. And for the last year and a half, the developers who have invited this Target store here have been an imminent threat to that home. Whether with the as-of-right mall that they wish to build now, or the 13-story spot rezoning that they unsuccessfully tried to push through this past year, the developers have shown a complete disregard for the safety, well-being, and sustainability of our neighborhood, looking only at our neighborhood as an opportunity for profit. And I can hear them today making comments and noises as people speak. They clearly do not respect us. In the same span of time, 3 blocks north of the site, I've been supporting my neighbors in organizing against our landlord, who was illegally raising rents by nearly $1,000 at times, harassing and endangering tenants with construction, and denying lease renewals. My neighbors and I spoke often about this development and the proposed Target being yet another sign of the changes in our neighborhood, and drew parallels between the experiences and ways construction made life unlivable for folks on the street, as we heard today. Many of my neighbors fondly remember the theater and the storefronts that used to be there, like the Colombian small businesses on 82nd Street, north of Roosevelt Avenue, storefronts that are now corporate chain stores, as we've mentioned, like Banana Republic, Gap, and Old Navy, stores that they no longer have any kind of relationship to and frankly cannot afford to shop at. I was appalled then when I learned of Maymay's shop closing because her landlord raised her rent by $3,000 in 1 month in anticipation of this development. It confirmed the connection we knew existed between development and rampant speculation. Our corporate landlord decided that the improvements they wanted to make to our building could only be done once we were long gone from it. And now we know from this that developers use language like regional destination and outer boroughs attraction to say that our homes are worth only as much as outsiders and corporate money deem it. 4031 82nd Street became part of a last look that some of my neighbors had at a building and a neighborhood that they no longer could recognize or call home. It is unconscionable to me that the developer decided that what our neighborhood and neighborhoods across the city needs most is yet another mall anchored by a Target store or a big box store at all, in a place that thrived because of immigrant small businesses and labor. Not affordable housing or another school to alleviate overcrowding, not better public transportation or workforce development, but a mall. I urge you to do the right thing and support the spirit of the zoning code and use your considerable power to keep disastrous, unsustainable development like this out of our neighborhoods. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good afternoon, board. My name is Abigail Aviles, and I am a graduate student at Queens College, where I am studying urban planning. So you could call me an urban planner in training. So what I've been learning in school is a lot about zoning, and I have learned that in my community, in Jackson Heights, it's Group 6, right? So it's been designated Group 6 because my neighborhood cannot handle anything more than that. There is a hospital that is a block away, and I even submitted a video proving that ambulances cannot get through 82nd Street to get their patients life-saving medical attention that they need. If this Target is constructed, people's lives will be at risk. People can die. because of the traffic congestion. And that the traffic congestion will only be exacerbated by the Target, as well as on the 7 train, where I commute on a daily basis. Apart from being a full-time student, I have 2 jobs, and both of them are located in Jackson Heights, 5 minutes away from the development. So on a daily basis, I have to walk past this development, the noise pollution it is creating, the cracks in the surrounding buildings it's created, all the children that are heading to school have to pass by it in the morning and when they're coming home from school. It's neglectful for Target to say that they visited the neighborhood, that they care about the neighborhood, when they have clearly stated that they intend to make this location a regional destination. They do not intend to serve my community members. They do not intend to serve myself. They intend to serve people from outer boroughs. And because of that, that does not designate them for a local use, which is clearly not designated within Group 6. So I implore all of you to please vote in favor or to decide in favor of my community. Do not, so no one is above the law, not even a retail giant like Target. That is why I implore you and your colleagues to do the right thing. Decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet cannot be located in districts that limit retail use to use Group 6, even if they are underground. By doing so, you decide to maintain our community and our infrastructure safe from risk. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Diego Palawachi. I already submitted my statement. It was about public safety, the same things that you guys heard about, traffic, and also just elderly and children like walking around the street and getting hit by cars because of the traffic that's happening right now. Besides that, I want to say, like, in my opinion, that I feel like here, many of you might not care about this anymore, or maybe your bosses already sat down with the developers because they have been putting a lot of money into this, and they're really comfortable they have made a decision. So that's my feeling. This is not like single thing. This happened through the city, and this is how gentrification works. So what I'm trying to express right here, Target's putting a lot of millions of dollars, and one of the things that it has a practice of being anti-worker. One thing that happened was recently when workers tried to unionize in a store, instead of giving the collective bargain to workers, they decided to close down the store and move it away. That is illegal under a United States labor law. And I wouldn't be surprised if here Target decides to, once Target decides to open and workers try to organize, that's what they're going to do. They don't care about that. They care about money. And this is what about things. This is not about what's right for them or what's good for them. It's just about money. So that's my testament. That's what I want to just say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? 3 more? Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for hearing us all today. At today's hearing, you're hearing about...
Your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. Karina Kaufman Gutierrez. So at today's hearing, you're hearing about my community, the area that I feel home at. I used to live within a few blocks of 4031 82nd Street, and I'm there on weekends and evenings, often to visit friends and purchase affordable food and clothes, like this jacket. Here, I've found the Colombian community that my family and I have always longed for since since my mom has moved to the United States. I'm currently a master's student in urban social policy at Columbia University with a focus in land use and economic development. If I have learned anything in my studies and in my lived experience as a community member, it is that today's policies have just been in line with an economic development mindset that continuously favors big box variety stores like Target and others, despite extensive research proving that investing in small businesses increases local economic wealth and stability. And today, you as the board have the ability to reverse this legacy and actually support the small businesses and local economies that make our city great. On 82nd Street, there's a huge difference between a locally serving store and an oversized variety store. The huge majority of shops on the block offer services and products affordable to working families that are run by long-term community members, and business is usually conducted in folks' native languages. Shops like Delicias Colombianas are located right across the street from the development site. They're small businesses that serve the community. Their clientele is composed of folks who live in the building above, who use the 82nd Street 7 train station daily, who pass by on their way to Elmhurst Hospital. Maymay's discount store, as Jay talked about earlier, they used to be located on the same block until their landlord jacked up the price by $3,000 in 1 month, stating that if large stores like Target can come in, he can now charge higher rent. So many immigrant shops do not have rock-solid leases like Maymay's. How are they supposed to compete with a multinational corporation with an army of lawyers here as they struggle to keep their doors open and serve their neighborhoods? I encourage you all to come to Jackson Heights and Elmhurst, to talk to people, to hear how many people do not want an oversized underground variety store. Stand in front of the development for 5 minutes, and you'll see how disruptive it already is to the traffic flow of the neighborhood, how much it stands out from other businesses on the block. Myself and my neighbors who are opposing this development are not NIMBYists. We're not anti-development. Rather, we are pro-development that actually serves our neighborhood, that provides opportunities for our immigrant neighbors in languages they are comfortable with. We are concerned about the safety and well-being of an already thriving local economy. I urge you all to do the right thing and keep oversized variety stores out of our thriving small business corridors and residential districts. Your decision is literally life and death for the small business owners in the neighborhood, for people trying to access Elmhurst Hospital, and for Jackson Heights' immigrant communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Francisco Tecaisco. I'll be reading a testimony on behalf of Jorge Cabiñas. Dear Chair, Permuter, and colleagues, my name is Jorge Cabiñas. This is my neighborhood. I have lived here in this neighborhood for 24 years and regularly travel down the street where the Target will be located. I respectfully ask you and your colleagues to decide that variety stores over 10,000 square feet not be located in districts that limit retail users to use Group 6 even if they are underground. Today you will hear about a planned regional destination for shopping at 4031 82nd Street in Elmhurst, Queens. It is zoned R6-3C1. Target does not belong here. It is clearly stated on the zoning resolution, and the reason is to prevent bad and irresponsible planning. There are already 2 Target stores 10 and 20 minutes away on public transportation, and they are located in mall establishments. The developers argue that the Target here will be different because it is a small-scale Target, and therefore it will not have an impact on traffic congestion or already crowded public transportation and infrastructure. Yet they have continued to market this department as a regional destination store. A destination store is defined as a retail store that combines several attributes to make it very attractive to the consumer. It prompts the consumer to make a special visit to the store for shopping, even if the location is not very convenient for the consumer. This can potentially life-threatening as traffic on 82nd Street is already high during peak hours. Ask any small business owner on the Strip and they can vouch on the ambulances having difficulty every time they attempt to make it to Elmhurst Hospital through that street. As Mayor Bill de Blasio stated, Elmhurst Hospital has the 8th busiest emergency room in the nation, and bringing in the traffic caused by a parking lot and Target store will only put our lives at stake. The developers argue that all the reasons for designing the current zoning on the lot should be discarded because they are now planning to host Target underground. This not only shows the tremendous privilege the developers is attempting to assert, but also the lack of concern for our communities. The developers have been disregarding and attempting to trump the zone on the lot since the beginning, first with an attempt at a 13-story spot rezoning, now with the continuation of this regional destination store. The fact that he is bringing in a Target store that, 1, does not qualify under the current zone, and 2, demand its monopolistic lease on the Group 6 local retail stores. These leaves of conventional responsibility should not be tolerated. I urge to respond to uphold the current zoning resolution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? One more? Hold on.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for listening to our testimony this morning. My name is Tania Matos Jose. I am a I'm a resident of Jackson Heights for over 30 years. I'm an immigrant and I live in the area with my husband. My immediate family also lives in the area. My extended family also lives in the area. So I respectfully ask for you to implement the laws that are currently on the books right now for Target. So I also work at an immigration legal organization. It's a nonprofit, and we directly serve the people that are living in our community. And so I just want to emphasize that because I see the daily struggles every single day of what community members go through, including children as young as 16 years old having to choose between school and going to work because they can't pay their rent. I come across elderly people who have to choose between paying the rent and eating. So this site, this development, and if Target comes in, will have a direct impact on people. This is not just a planning thing. I'm not a planner. I'm not at all. I'm looking at this from a people perspective, and it's very, very clear that our community does not want this Target. We do not want it at all. Nobody comes. Jackson Heights is world known, okay? But the people don't come for Target. All right? People don't come for Target. Absolutely not. They come for the people. They come for the food. They come for the culture. Target doesn't care about any of that. They care about their dividends, and they care about making profit for their investors, not about the people. And that's what we're here for. I'm also here because I'm representing a group called Queens Neighborhoods United, and we are against the displacement of our community members. And we will continue fighting this development because it's basically our survival of this development if this development goes through. I also want to invite you actually to Jackson Heights. If you've never been there, I would love to take you on a tour to invite you and show you the dynamic of our community. It should be a historic community because the times that when the city did not want to invest in communities like ours, the immigrant community was able to build it up and keep it up. So very few corporations entered our community. And so that's why you see, and we value our 99-cent stores. We value all these small stores because they're affordable to us. Because again, once again, I'm telling you, I've lived undocumented for many years of the 30 years that I've been in this country. And I know the struggle that every day that these people have to pay to even buy clothing, to send their children to school. And lastly, the actual development right now is actually very dangerous. I don't feel comfortable walking there. I live 2.5 blocks away from there. And I don't feel comfortable walking there because it's very dark. You have to walk literally on the street. All right, so in the end, I request that you do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Any speakers? More speakers?
Any more? Okay.
No? Okay, so I just want to say something before we go back to, sorry, it's off.
Oh, you're right.
Before we go back to Ms. Siegel, in response to some of the things I heard in testimony which were a little disturbing, and I want to address outright. So this is a board of appeals, or the board of standards, which we actually no longer pursue, and appeals, right? We're an independent body made up of 5 commissioners, and the 5 commissioners are actually not permitted to speak to anyone outside of its own agency about pending cases. So let's make that clear. We speak to no one. The board members, the 5 commissioners who are sitting here, the 5 of us up to Commissioner Shivetta, we rely entirely on the submitted written and spoken testimony that's provided by the appellants, the property owners, and interested citizens, both at the hearings and through the Submit website, all of which become a part of a written and a video recorded public record, which is open for everyone to view. Our hearings here are videotaped, and then probably tomorrow morning or later this afternoon, you would be able to access the videotapes. So to be clear, no one contacts us and tells us how to vote, okay? We have 3, so in terms of the question about understanding the community and how we interpret what we hear, we have 3 non-lawyers among the 5 commissioners. One of the non-lawyers is an urban planner. That's Commissioner Shanda. One of the lawyers, that's myself, is also an architect. 2 of the commissioners currently live in Queens, Commissioner Shanda and Commissioner Shita. And at least 2 of the commissioners sat previously on their community boards before they joined the commission, so are very, very aware of community concerns in their own communities. Again, that was Commissioner Shanda and myself, and I don't know actually if any other commissioners sat on their community boards. So to just set that straight, we are very aware of community concerns because we are part of the community, and some are part of the community that's the subject of this. Let's say not exactly the subject, let's say in which the building that is the subject of the appeal is located, okay? But also I want to explain what it is we do here and what we do not do. The Department of Buildings' job is to interpret the zoning resolution. That's actually what it says in the text of the zoning resolution. Their authority is to interpret what it means. But in the case of disputes about what it means, the appeals process, so in this case, the appellant has decided that DOB's interpretation of the zoning is not accurate. So then the appellant comes to us, and our job here on the board is to decide what it means. And even where an individual board member may prefer that the meaning were something else because the outcome is just not pleasant, and we have many cases where individual board members may not be happy about the outcome, but nonetheless, the meaning may be clear. And so that board member may nonetheless vote that the meaning is clear, even though the outcome is, say, undesirable, personally undesirable. The board does not zone. That's a very important thing to understand. We do not write the zoning resolution. That's the City Planning Commission's job with the City Council. And so in a situation like this, where the board may decide that the meaning of the text is clear, the real issue is, should the text be modified, and who does that? That's the City Planning Commission in concert with the City Council. Okay. And also, I just want to point out another thing about the department, about the issue of traffic, which I brought up earlier. You know, if there are issues about access to a hospital, for example, that really is the Department of Transportation's job, and very often community boards work with the Department of Transportation in street widenings or providing emergency routes or eliminating parking on certain roadways to make the emergency route clear. Fire department also works on things like that. So just to make clear what our purview is, in this case, it's a very tiny purview relative to what all of the concerns are about this, this particular issue. Okay, so Ms. Siegel.
Please state your name again for the record.
Absolutely. Paula Siegel, attorney for the appellants. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know that it's been emotional and maybe a little bit repetitive, but I think you can hear from the folks who are with us here today that they have been trying to protect their neighborhood from this invasion of a retail destination in many, many fora. And so just to clarify some of the timeline, after the present owners purchased this property, there was a big press announcement that they were going to build a Target. Actually, this more or less the store we're talking about now. And then they put out renderings of a residential building and did a different press strategy. In the meantime, they also filed the Department of Buildings application we're talking about today for that two-story building, the one we're talking about today. But parallel to that process, they initiated an attempt to rezone this property. That rezoning would have changed the designation of the zoning district from C1 to C4, where retail destinations are allowed. And that's why they actually went as far as the City Planning Commission and described how great a retail destination would be if it were mapped on this site. Then they withdrew their application. That rezoning never happened. So a lot of the things you heard about from the residents today were actually said in the context of that rezoning application. The rezoning didn't happen. The lot remains C1, and yet the developer's plans have also not changed. So they're actually now trying to put at this location a establishment that they know is only allowed in a C4 district. So that's what we're talking about today. And I think
have some questions for you, unless you have more that you wanted to add.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in just kind of reminding myself about what the scope of this building is, I note that there's a retail space called Retail Space E on the second floor, and it has a tiny lobby that accesses it. It's just that's what, on the set of documents that we have. There may be other documents. So on the second floor, there's a retail space that's 18,400 and change square feet. And so I ask, and it's accessed by a tiny lobby that's just big enough for the staircase and the elevator. I ask then, why aren't you concerned, why isn't the community concerned about a potential Nike store, which is, of course, certainly a destination store. We have very few Nike stores in the city, right? Or I was just trying to think of, so a Nike store is arguably is a shoe store.
Yeah, Your Honor, I'm sorry, the amended application, that's a community facility.
Okay, but nonetheless, the ZD1, which is what gets submitted to the Department of Buildings for review, that allows, because they didn't exceed their maximum floor area, maximum retail floor area is 2 FAR, I believe, and they were well under the 2, with the second floor containing 18,000 square feet of retail.
I'm sorry, it's not retail. So that when they submitted their amended application in response to our zoning challenge, which led to the stop work order, they changed that.
Okay.
So we would be concerned if that was still the plan.
Okay, but you would be concerned, but you wouldn't be able to make an argument about floor area there, because floor area is floor area, in that sense that second floor is an 18,000 square foot
community
second floor.
facility.
No, please. The original ZD1 that was filed was a legal application. That they chose to modify it to community facility is their prerogative. There's no difference in parking requirements, for example, between the ambulatory care facility and the use group 6 retail. So they're all parking, it's parking category B effectively, so it's all the same measurement in a C1, what is a C1? C1-3. So there are several shops or typologies that are permitted without respect to maximum floor area. A shoe store, a sporting goods store like Sports Authority, a toy store like FAO Schwartz, a bookstore like Barnes & Noble, all of which we think of as being very large destination retail, but they're completely permitted. There aren't a lot of Barnes & Nobles left anymore, right? The only think of is on Union Square.
Or Amazon bookstore.
Amazon bookstore, right, since Amazon, there's actually a number of stores that are now beginning to have street access, right? So, you can touch it. I was just reading about First Dibs is selling furniture now.
Oh, that's right.
Right, in a retail store. And as you know, they represent thousands and tens of thousands of products, so imagine the size of that store. So I am curious then how you would make the argument there where the zoning resolution does not limit the amount of floor area in those above ground spaces, so it's immaterial whether it's in the cellar or not, and in this particular case it's an 18,000 square foot retail space, and there are at least 4 viable, gigantic retail types that could go in there, and those are just the ones that I was able to find while we were doing this. So that's my first question that I would like you to discuss in writing. You don't need to do this on the fly, unless you want to.
Well, I'm happy to discuss 2 aspects of that.
Okay.
So, first of all, there was a revision to that ZD1, but even if there had not been, we don't know who the tenant is, and we don't know for that second floor, and we don't know what use it's going to, what specific use in use group 6 that floor is going to be assigned.
But
right, there's no...
So Department of Buildings testified, and we know that to be the case because that's how retail spaces developed, right? Most retail buildings are developed on a spec basis, right? The developer comes in, builds a 2-story plus cellar space, it complies with zoning, and then the real estate agents go out there and try to find tenants, right? And in fact, on the marketing materials, you can see they have the logos of lots of different kinds of retailers who might be attracted to this space, right? And so they're going out there with imagine yourself on the second floor of this great location kind of thing. DOB only looks at, does it comply with zoning, right? What the occupant, the actual tenancy is, they don't care unless it's been mischaracterized by the architect who filed the drawings. But basically, if it says use group 6 retail, it has to be one of those listed in the use group 6 retail. And if it's 18,000 square feet of floor area, then it has to be one of those listed that don't have a limitation. So it doesn't matter who the tenant is unless you're saying DOB should now, because don't forget what we do here. What we do here is try to have DOB's work be consistent with DOB's past work and future work, right? So what you may be suggesting is DOB now needs to ask every applicant, who's the tenant? And in which case, now you're giving a whole new job to DOB that it's never pursued before. Who's the tenant?
Yeah, so we are absolutely not
Correct, a new
asking
job
that.
that's not in the
Can you
zoning.
state what you just said, Vice Chair? I didn't hear that.
And I would say that's not in DOB's purview to
No.
foresee what potential tenant might be occupying any space, may that be commercial, residential, or community facility, other than based on what the use groups that are listed in the zoning resolution.
But the materials that were submitted as part of this applicant's application for the construction of this space state that the cellar will be used as a variety store. And that is our issue, right? Is this actually, although of course it is a case about Target, since Target has a memorandum of lease, it's been recorded in ACRIS, it's information that DOB has. Even without that, the materials submitted by the architects on behalf of the developer say that the cellar will be used by a variety store, and that space is over 23,000
But the
square feet.
stated ills are traffic, reduction in commercial activities, the small commercial activities, pedestrian, bringing people from outside the neighborhood. I probably missed some. Do you want to pick up? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to pick up from what the chair said. If the stated ills are traffic, displacement, change in the neighborhood character for a retail store that would be occupying, based on Target's proposal, more than 20,000 square foot of floor area, assuming the cellar floor did not exist and it was a commercial storefront with the ground floor and the second floor, it would be well over 20,000 square foot. And that would be an as-of-right use group 6. You could have an as-of-right use group 6 that does not have a floor area limitation of 10,000. There are a lot of use groups. There are a lot of use group 6 that do not have floor area limitations. So I would caution you, when you're making this argument, you base it on the uses that are permitted and how it would be treated. If the ills that you have represented are a concern, then that concern would hold steady for a ground floor and a second floor commercial retail use on this side. That would be more than 20,000 square foot, right?
Or more than 10,000.
We're not drafting the zoning resolution today, we're only reading it, and it
But
says
based on your
variety
interpretation,
stores are
I'm just
limited
applying,
to 10,000
I am
square
applying
feet.
your argument. I'm applying your argument. I'm not interpreting the zoning. I'm applying your argument. So a store that does not have that does not have a floor area limitation of 10,000 square foot in use group 6 would be permitted to use the ground floor and the second floor. Could it, right? Yeah. Would it not have the same set of ills as you have stated for what Target is proposing? And be very careful.
But that's speculative.
Isn't
that is not the situation. That is not what we're here to discuss today. So I can't
But we are,
tell
so
you
we
what I
are
think about
trying
it.
to figure out what it is that you think. So if you wanted us to bypass the clear meaning of the text, right, and to jump into public policy, we need we need rationale for that, right? And so we're hearing what the stated ills are, traffic, displacement, et cetera. So then we have to ask, well, it seems as if then you should be objecting to all uses greater than 10,000 square feet, no matter how measured, as opposed to some uses, but you're not objecting to those other uses that are allowed to be greater.
We have to rely on the zoning resolution, and you're correct that there might be a need to amend the resolution, but when it comes to variety stores, the plain language says 10,000 square feet per establishment. And as the commissioner rightfully pointed out, the impacts of an establishment over 10,000 square feet will be the same whether it's in the cellar or on the ground floor.
So, and if you, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so if you could, if you're able to, in your submission, if you can state the difference from these, say, a toy store and a variety store, if you believe that would be different, the harms would be different. It sounds like that would be helpful to at least two of the commissioners. What I would like is if you can state how much, if you can brief how much we're actually able to consider neighborhood character or harm in this type of interpretive appeal.
The courts defer to the board on issues like that.
Well,
I'm happy to brief that
because
I'm happy to brief.
I understand. And because it seems like there is a lot of people testify to it.
This is you guys. We're here. Like, you have the power to do this.
If we can have some precedent, some case law that states that even if there's a clear meaning in the zoning resolution, we are able to look beyond that because of the harms that that this project creates on the neighborhood.
Okay. The other thing that I would like to just jump to is, again, because our job is to look at how DOB applies meaning, interpretation of the zoning resolution. One of the many things we do when we're talking about text that may be not so clear is we look at, because this is a different situation, but when we look at text that's not so clear and we kind of, maybe we could go either way, or maybe we need a little help in getting fully to the place that we believe we can get to, we ask DOB, so how have you applied the meaning in the past? Do you have situations where sometimes you say floor area is in the cellar, and sometimes you say it's not in the cellar, applying the identical sections of the zoning resolution as opposed to, for example, the regulations for how you measure an adult establishment requires that you actually measure what's going on in the cellar, right? So in that situation, that wouldn't count because the zoning resolution is very clear. DOB, measure the stuff that's in the cellar, right?
And the same thing with the Tribeca case.
And Tribeca, that's a special permit, measure the stuff that's in the cellar, right? But so we'd need to know, has DOB ever, or how often does it, or does it regularly mix and match how it interprets the word floor area with respect to cellar? Because if, in the history of DOB, we don't have any examples, or the last example was in 1976 where it realized it made a mistake and then it reversed, that would also show that DOB has been consistently interpreting the zoning resolution to mean X, right?
How would we find that?
Well, so that's part of that.
That sounds great. How do we look?
No, but actually, what we have appellants who do incredible amounts of research. They often do things like hire former DOB commissioners who know their way around the Department of Buildings.
Do we look capable of doing that?
No,
like, is that, you realize I work at a not-for-profit legal services organization, right?
That.
And John is a retired city attorney who's volunteering for us.
Okay, so
those are our resources.
I want to put out there that even if DOB were to do the research, again, that's kind of like proving a negative, because I sincerely doubt DOB would be able to find a time when it's applied the word floor area to cellar, except prior to Raritan's decision when it was doing it all the time, right? Hence the wrapping of the knuckles by the Court of Appeals with respect to that decision, right? So, so you have to do it post-Raritan if you were looking at it. So, I mean, DOB could perhaps do some research. I'm not sure how we do it. It is a little bit like proving a negative, but I do want to say that absent that kind of erratic behavior at the Department of Buildings, we would be completely shifting DOB policy or past behavior in interpreting the zoning resolution, which is their job, actually. And our job is to check that they've been interpreting it properly, right?
Against the language of the zoning resolution.
Yes, but, again, when it's not clear. Okay. So that's
So how do you,
another-
so you're asking us, post Raritan, how has DOB been using floor area when it's in the cellar of a building, when it grants permits? How do we do that? We'll do whatever it is that you're asking us to do. But I don't work at the DOB.
I mean, my question actually related to that, and this might inform how you and/or DOB look into this question, is does any party know of any instances where a variety store has cellar space and that cellar space has been included as floor area?
There are several Target variety stores that have opened in the city that are located in the cellar. One is on 14th Street and Avenue A or B, maybe between A and B. It has a temporary certificate of occupancy. It does not have a final certificate, has not been reviewed.
Is that located in a district where the
Yeah,
floor?
it's another C1 district. And then there's a Target, which inexplicably is on the mezzanine floor. It's a little higher than the ground floor, which is also about 20,000 square feet, maybe 22 on Grand and Essex. And and also in a C1 district, where the C1 overlay was actually just carefully added as part of the Essex Crossing rezoning. Prior to that rezoning in 2012, no retail was allowed on that block at all. Target somehow is on this mezzanine that's either the first or the second floor with a 20,000 square foot store that...
Oh, you're about to tip
over.
Yeah,
Am I about to destroy everything here? Great. Good. Ooh. Okay. I didn't realize that wasn't a little table.
So I'm sorry, what are you saying about those Target stores?
I am just saying that there's some issues that nobody's brought before you, but so these Target Express locations seem to be trying to find places where they can slip into the urban fabric. And particularly the one on Grand Street, it's part of Essex Crossing. On a parcel that until 2012 and the Essex Crossing rezoning prohibited retail completely as part of a large-scale residential development, no retail at all. It got a C1 overlay, and somehow Target has opened in that C1 overlay district on something above the ground floor. You have to go up some stairs to get to it, and then there's a Trader Joe's in the cellar, and if you look at the documents that correspond, which is a temporary certificate of occupancy, so maybe it hasn't been reviewed fully, it appears that their initial plans were to do it backwards. The Target would go in the cellar, and Trader Joe's would go in that mezzanine.
Okay.
I don't know. But it's still non-conforming, but neither of those has a certificate of occupancy.
No, but the question was in a situation where DOB has interpreted the cellar in a variety store to be floor area, like that it exceeds the 10,000 square foot maximum.
We really tried to find those locations, and what we found was these other instances of Target, but there has not been a final certificate of occupancy issued, so there has not been a final review for conformity
But just to
with zoning.
distinguish the Grand Street, the Essex Crossing one, that's in a C25, and also you've just... you've also clarified that the Target store itself is not in the cellar, so
But the filing says it should.
Is it?
The latest temporary certificate of occupancy, which is in the papers, puts the variety store in the cellar and the grocery store on the upper floor. That's not what's physically there. I went look.
What is physically there? Is there a Target
the other
in the
way
cellar?
around.
So there's no Target in the cellar?
So the Target is in that space on the second floor where...
Which is not the cellar.
Which is not the cellar, but it is also limited to use group 6, and it's kind of inexplicable what it's doing there at all.
Limited to use group 6, but it's a C2.
It's a C25.
It's a C.
Which is also limited to use group 6.
Oh, Okay, but the target is therefore being a use group 6, is what you're saying?
At 20,000 square feet on the mezzanine, which doesn't make any sense at all, and it seems to me that it reveals a pattern of DOB simply ignoring the 10,000 square foot per establishment limit, no matter where the variety store is located, whether it's in the cellar or not.
Aren't there regulations that can exempt mezzanines from floor area in certain
Only if they're
circumstances, but only if they're
very
shallow?
short.
No, I'm not even sure if it's really the
I don't
mezzanine.
think
I'm just,
anymore, actually.
I don't know what it is. I had to walk up about 7 stairs to get to the front door of Target. So it seems like there's a pattern of this 10,000 square foot per establishment limit for variety stores in use group 6 being ignored across the board, not just in the cellars.
So a supermarket does not have
No.
any limitation on floor area?
No, but the variety store does.
Right.
And there's probably a reason why a supermarket doesn't. That,
Of course.
okay.
Yeah, no, and so which is why the
perhaps-
question about these other uses that are unlimited, they're all uses that planners who carefully drafted zoning resolution thought through, and there are certain uses that they limited, right? But hardware
specific
stores,
reasons.
grocery stores, drugstores, they're all unlimited in use group 6.
Right, but so-
presumably because they're things that people need where they live.
Yeah, but so actually, we've had direct experience with a supermarket, for example, which was an enormous cause of incredible traffic. So a destination supermarket for the entire neighborhood, because I guess they had the best deals and the most produce and so on. And so again, but the zoning resolution thinks that's, doesn't need to be limited as to size. So.
But our job today is to interpret and apply the zoning resolution. Here, there are-
Yes, which is how, this is what we do to interpret and apply, right? We try to look at other places where similar situations occur so that we can use those similarities to make our determination, right? We can't stay, we stay both closely to the definition, but then we also look at applications elsewhere. That's just how we weigh things. Okay. Anything else to add? And I did want to get into this subject of impact again. So you're talking about the impact of the use. Again, when we're looking at a clear definition, there's no environmental quality review. That's when we're talking about impact. And also, there's no neighborhood character study because this is not a variance, right?
Of course, but those were done as part of their rezoning application. Those were already done. So when you heard people refer to those, they were done as part of the application to rezone this property from C1 to C4. Okay. So, and those are in the record, or I didn't submit a gazillion pages. I submitted the relevant pages.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other open issues? Okay, so then I would like to set this for a continued hearing. DOB, did you want to add anything? Do any of the other council want to add anything? No?
Okay.
DOB? No?
So Ms. Siegel, how much time will you need to prepare a submission?
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yeah, okay, maybe a month. Let's be real.
And then DOB.
But we're in a time crunch. Construction is continuing. So let's go with a month.
Okay, and then DOB and I imagine property owners and Target will want time to respond, just typically 3 weeks?
3 weeks for simultaneous
responses to the appellant's submission. And then, Ms. Siegel, would you like a 2-week reply?
Wait, I'm sorry. So is that so a month and then 3 weeks after that? We'll take a week after that.
So a week after that? Okay,
can we get it on for hearing in 2 months?
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah. so it adds up to 8 when we're done.
But it also has to be in time for the Board of Commissioners to review. So, or we can lessen your response time to 3 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 week. 1, 2, 3, that would be a submission March 28th. Then the following submission would be, 1, 2, 3, April 18th. Another week would be April 25th. 1, 2, 3 would be May. I'm not sure what you want to do about, if you want to have another special hearing for this, or.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know if I can.
Or we can just pick a hearing and then close that hearing for any additional.
Open.
Sorry?
You could close the hearing and leave the record open should we need to
That's true, that's true too.
open any issues.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, April 25th. I think that takes us to May 21st hearing.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah.
Would the board be planning to close the record after the next hearing?
After the next, yeah.
Okay, I think with timing, it has to, the next hearing will be May 21st, so if you'll bear with me.
So, I'm sorry, what's that?
I've said.
She's working.
If you'll bear with me, the next hearing appears to be May 21st with the following submission deadlines. Ms. Siegel, 1, 2, 3, you'll get 4 weeks till April 4th to submit. That's a Thursday. DOB, property owner, and the tenant will have 3 weeks, puts them at April 25th, which is also a Thursday. And then Ms. Siegel, you'll have a week to respond. That gives you till May 2nd. And then the board's hearing will be May 21st on a Tuesday.
Okay, so can we go again?
Yes.
So the appellant gets April 4th?
Yes.
Both parties, Target and the property owner, get
And
April
DOB.
25th?
They're the actual
DOB, sorry, yes.
party to this.
Sorry.
Direct party to this. It's April 25th.
And then Sir reply is 5/2?
Yes, that's right.
And hearing
Does
is
that work for everyone?
And I'm sorry, the submissions that you requested from DOB, when are those due?
Those are due April 25th.
April 25th.
Okay.
Do you want more time to do a Sir reply?
Yeah, we cannot change it once it's decided.
Yeah, I know, is there any way that their submissions, based on the questions that you were asking today, can be due at the same time as our submission?
Oh, what we could do is do simultaneous submissions and simultaneous replies, and then
That would shorten it.
It would shorten the briefing period.
That would be great.
But
then
But I don't know that I don't know that you get an earlier hearing is the thing.
Oh, well, okay.
May 7th.
We are missing a commissioner.
No, that's
This
fine.
would
We'll
be
keep it
April
the way.
21st.
If it's not gonna move us
It's
back
not
in
gonna
May,
move
then
your-
it's
your
not worth
hearing
it.
date.
Yeah, then I might as well read their paper.
Because just to be clear, this is going to be held on a regular hearing date with other cases as well, so we won't have the,
Luxury of.
Also,
that's why we need to put it on a schedule that can work for.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and will there be another opportunity for the public to testify at that point?
That's what I was gonna speak to, so.
We have this other DOB determination. I don't know if it's a big one. Yeah, but that's okay.
We're a board that hears appeals.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm not in here till 9 o'clock. We don't want to do that.
Okay. So with the May 21st hearing, this is a special hearing, which we did because we knew there'd be a lot of neighborhood involvement, and thank you for coming and thank you for speaking. The next hearing will be just a general hearing of the board, which already has 14 other calendar items scheduled. So our calendar will come out and you'll know the order that you're appearing. It starts at 10 a.m., but you're not necessarily going to, maybe we can move it to the front of the hearing, actually?
We have another DOB case, so we usually put DOB
At the top
on
of
at the
the hearing.
beginning, so because in deference to another agency that has to get back to work.
It is 7112 Main Street.
Is that a big case?
Determination
Well, that's
not.
also my case, but
Yeah.
I guess I'll have to discuss that with my
Okay. In other words, maybe.
Big month for you.
Yeah. Is that doable? We don't want to
I'll
make it
discuss
impossible.
with Felicia, maybe one of the cases can be reassigned.
Okay.
Okay, good.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for
And then
coming.
will there be an opportunity for public?
Oh, right, that
testimony?
was your question. So the
Yeah.
hearing is still open, so there will be opportunity for public to speak. You'll similarly be limited to 3 minutes.
And
It
also
should we-
provide written testimony.
Should we consider putting it at the end of the calendar in that case?
No. we
Because
always
people are
put-
coming from work,
Yeah.
it's just.
Yeah,
it's-
we put it at the
yeah.
beginning. Ideally, we are done so
In
we
and out.
can go back.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the
But-
record will remain open until the end of the hearing on May 21st. So
Yes.
written
Yes.
submissions from the public,
Yes.
from other elected officials.
Yes, you don't
until
have to
that
come
date.
to the hearing. If you're not able, you can always submit testimony in writing, and the commissioners read everything.
Yeah, and actually, yes, you can, if members of the public can't make it, you could send written correspondence to submit@bsa.nyc.gov. Just, you know what to do. And that does make it to the record, everyone sees it.
And just please make sure, remember your submission dates, because those are the dates that are your scheduled dates. You can't obfuscate from that date unless
can't vary from the date, yeah. We don't give any extensions unless you work this out amongst
all the
all
parties.
the
Everyone
interested
agrees.
parties.
And that may then change the hearing date.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
This concludes, oh, sorry. This concludes the public hearing for March 7th, 2019.
Hi.
Who's out on the 21st?